Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Product-Led Growth Bootcamp organized by the Product-Led Growth Hub, the world's first PLG Academy. My name is Ann Krieger, and I am the head of customer success at Fireside and also a trainer at Product-Led Growth Hub. Most importantly, though, I'm going to be your host for the next 4 hours, where the PLG Hub's Academy members, along with established SaaS leaders, will discuss product-led growth and the future of SaaS given the unfortunate COVID pandemic. The PLG Bootcamp is going to be live streaming for 23 hours, so you can learn from the best. We will cover everything from the basics of PLG, utilizing the voice of the customer, the importance of data, being a remote-first company, and much more. If you are passionate about PLG, SaaS, or even startups, this event is for you. Be sure to register in the link below so that you can get the most out of the PLG Bootcamp experience. Also, for anyone that has registered through OWIWI, College Link, and Insurance Market, we're going to do a special drawing for you so you can have an all-access pass to the bootcamp. The winner is going to be emailed at the end of today's session. Specifically, the event agenda for today is going to include the Academy's kickoff, where the Product-Led Growth Hub team members are going to discuss the mission of the training programs and answer any of your questions in regards to why PLG is of rising importance. Our second session will be a fireside chat. Hi, guys. Our second session will be a fireside chat concerning the future in the SaaS industry after the COVID pandemic. Panelists will be some of the world's most established SaaS leaders from organizations like Signal, EXB Group, OWIWI, and others. They're going to be discussing things like the digital transformation, best practices, and tips and innovative ideas to retain and even grow your customers during these uncertain times. Moving forward, the third session will be a live AMA with Ashvan Vaidyanathan, the Chief Customer Officer at Gainsight. He's going to sit down with Despina Exdaktilu, who's the founder of the PLG Hub, and she's going to discuss, or they're going to discuss how organizations can fight churn and do more with less during this COVID crisis. Last but not least, our final section will focus on the true impact on startups on society in this times. George and Stephanie from the Youth Entrepreneurship Club will be talking about the impact of startups and how they can actually impact our society during this time of crisis. So in case you have yet to do so, once again, be sure to register for the PLG Academy so that you can access all the free sessions and have lifetime access to all of our material and stream it whenever you'd like. The link is below, so be sure to sign up today. We are going to start off by diving in with our core training team at the PLG Hub. John, who specializes in product strategy and is also a senior PM at eSatisfaction. Emma specializes in customer success, and she's a CSM at ProdPad. George specializes in engineering and also works as an engineering manager at Global Web Index. And last but not least, we have Nikki Forrest, who specializes in UX and is the head of product design at Signal. So we're going to kick this off, but with a short discussion with all of them, and they will be able to answer any of your questions as well. To begin, let's talk to John and Nikki Forrest about the Product-Led Growth Hub. Can you guys introduce yourselves really quickly?
Hey, hello everyone.
Hello guys.
My name is Ioannis Fabrikas.
And my name is Nikki Forrest.
And I will be the lead trainer of the product strategy for the Product-Led Growth Hub, as Anne mentioned before. And I'm also senior product manager of Satisfaction.com.
And I will be the lead trainer in the user experience courses during the PLG Hub.
Fantastic. And I'm sure our audience would actually like to take a step back and ask, how did you guys get into product-led growth initially?
Personally, I've been working as a product manager for the last 5 years, and only recently I realized that product-led growth is sort of fundamental for business to grow, especially for startups that begin now in software as a service. I think product should be the center, and it makes sense to build around something that is like so valuable and malleable at the same time. I think as a product manager, we should drive the company, and basically this is what matters in the end. Building a product that users love.
So my story is a little bit different in the product-led growth concept, because if you want to design something, usually you need to back it up, or if you want to sell it to a stakeholder, to a client, you need to back it up with data. So basically, product-led growth concept helps a lot the design process to be more data-driven. So this eventually will lead the designer to actually produce features for the clients and for the users of the product that is super valuable.
Wonderful. And my next question is, where do you actually see the SaaS industry going? And why do you think it is important to put a PLG Academy together in the middle of this pandemic?
Well, now that it's in the middle of the pandemic, we saw that everyone is working from home, so it's important to interact with products that make your life easier. So building a product that customers can enjoy or like interact and engage all the time is important, and that's why I believe that product growth is fundamental, especially for times like this. And if you pave your way on top of that, then you will be safe for the future to come from more features or changes in the market. And this is why it's very important for me.
Fantastic. All right. And can you guys tell us a little bit about the Academy's training programs?
Yeah, okay. I can talk on my side for the product management role, the course, sorry. The product management course is divided into three main parts. We have the product ops, the product management fundamentals, and the product management advanced course. Basically, we will introduce what is product ops and why a startup or a more established company can have a product ops team. What is the transformation that we have to go through to build a team like product ops, and especially we have to define what's a product ops team, what they do, because it's like a term which is very new to the industry. So initially we have to understand why and how we can transform the company or the organization to have a product ops team. Next, we have product management, fundamentals, where we will be examining how you can build a product that your users love. So beginning from your backlog or gathering requirements or getting user feedback is very important. So this is what we'll be analyzing in the basic fundamentals. And then we have product management advanced, where we will analyze what the product quality metrics you have to go through, what products you have, what data you have to collect, how you can instrument those data in your product instrumentation and make better informed decisions. So this is an advanced course, and you will go through that after your product management actually grows to become a more product growth schema oriented, let's say.
And in my course, it's also divided in two sections. The one is the product design essentials, which basically we will dive into the more UI stuff of the design, and how the designer, when he produces a result, he can communicate it with the developers, and at the end of the day, produce the result that the designer has in mind, and the general the team has in mind. And the second part is we dive into the UX world and analyze step by step the processes that you need from day one to start collecting feedback from a potential client, and taking that down the road where you can actually take that feedback, analyze it, create solutions, iterate on the solutions, and eventually how these things can apply into a day-to-day life of a product designer in the SaaS industry.
Wow, that has to be so interesting, and I'm sure that our viewers here are going to get a ton of value from both of your sessions. So Thank you very much for your insightful feedback on the PLG training programs and the ones that you are going to be hosting. So let's go ahead and turn over to our PLG Hub's lead trainers as a whole and dive into their areas of expertise. I'm going to go ahead and start off with asking questions to you all individually, but the audience, be sure to get your questions ready so we can try to answer all of them afterwards. So, John, I know that you do specialize in product management, but can you tell us how you actually got into product management?
Well, in the beginning, my initial background is in the development area. I'm a web developer. So I begin writing code for starters, but then I realized that it's very exciting to actually design things and go further into building products that are very, difficult to build or to see what's the impact of the product to the people. So I started collaborating with more people and building teams. And then this is what gets even more exciting, because building teams and actually managing a product and collecting all the data is like you have the big picture of what you're doing. You're not, let's say, into your code, isolated anymore. So it's so great to see what your work is out there, goes out there, and what's the impact that it has to the people. And of course, I like even now more than ever, I like how to build relationships, because in the end, product management is about bringing people together, like also developers and customer success and different teams, especially in the product growth aspect and schema, build multiple teams together and work towards the same goal. So this is what drives me now.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think that's so important, especially as a product manager. And really through this times where we're all remote, having to bring them together and actually listen to everyone's voice. So I completely agree. George, as an engineer, can you tell me a little bit about you and your experience?
So I'm coming from a various background, working in banking in Morgan Stanley, and then moved to insurance, where I've served as a CTO in a Greek insurance firm, in Netas Insurances. Then I had a dual role at some point, working in a maritime startup, Signal Ocean, working actually with Nikiforos. There I had the chance to be both a product manager and an engineering manager. And currently I'm working as an engineering manager in a Global Web Index, where we're trying to give that new focus in how engineering is actually now a core part of the product and building the products that the customers not only love, but they actually want.
Man, that has to be a very important and critical role at any company.
Well, it is important to actually collaborate with the other people. It's not important on its own. It's like, in a SaaS world where products are in the middle, which is what we're trying to educate people about here, the PLG growth principles. No one can do it all, right? There's no Michael Jordan or something. So we're trying to set all these principles that break down these silos, and we try to promote collaboration. So yeah, my role is important, but what I want to say is that it's no more important than what Nikiforos or Emma's or John's role is. And that's why what we need to do is figure out all these processes that will allow us to collaborate effectively and not waste our capacity, which I believe is huge.
Wonderful. Very well said. Emma, how did you get into customer success and product-led growth?
Yeah, so I am currently, like you said, a customer success manager at ProdPad, and ProdPad is actually product management software. Before I moved into that role, I was actually a product manager myself using ProdPad. So I really found that taking the opportunity to join a company that I love and get to speak with product people all the time about product thinking and helping them to be successful was the perfect opportunity, really. And so with product-led growth and developing the course that I've been working on, where we're going to be focusing on how customer success aligns with product-led growth around onboarding and retention and expansion, it's really an opportunity for me to further explore how these disciplines complement each other.
I completely understand that. And how did you actually get into product-led growth with ProdPad initially. So you said that you are a product manager. How'd you get into that?
So before all that, I was actually a project manager. So I saw the error of my ways and I became a product manager, basically.
That's fantastic. That's a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
All right. And Nikki Forrest, how did you get into design and product-led growth?
I mean, my story about design, it's a bit weird because I started as an engineer. But, I was always drawn to attention to the detail and create websites and play with them. Back in the days, there was tools like Dreamweaver. So those things allowed me to, gradually craft a website. So I said, probably engineering is not for me. And I shifted my point of view into design and, into that world of creating and crafting everything, basically.
That's nice. I mean, it definitely still gives you the attention to detail, though. So
yeah,
it's wonderful. All right.
For the product-led aspect, I mean, data is gold. It's everything. So it helps us in all the principles and the framework of product-led growth. Concepts are like, bread and butter for a designer. They are super important.
I couldn't agree more. And with that, how do you actually manage customer feedback and aggregate that?
Initially, we didn't, but we in the previous companies also, we designers were a bit in a gray area. Oh, he's a guy, just give him something to design, and at the end of the day, he will need to produce something, and we will do it. So now, things are shifting into a more open point of view. So everybody has access to the customer feedback, and we get that data back, and we gradually analyze it and trying to see and prioritize what is best, and for the company, for the engineering team, the product management team, and the design team, of course, and then for the clients. If one client asks something, it's different if 10 clients ask for something. So when trying, to find a way to balance that information and bring it back into the process of design.
Yeah, I completely get that. And that leads me actually into my next question for John. What was the first transformation as a product manager that they have to work with when becoming when going towards a product-led growth model?
Well, this is a nice question, and it's also a difficult one because if you can think of that in detail, there's no specific line where you say, now I'm a product-led, no, I'm not product-led, now I am. So this is as part of a transformation. It may take a lot of days, months, depends on the company and the size. So, product-led, what do they say as product-led growth strategy? They say that, okay, place your product in the middle and let the product take care of everything, like retention, acquisition, expansion, everything. So after you say that you're product-led, it's about all communication. It's about aligning your surrounding teams, because product-led, you have to put your product team in the center and make all the important decisions and communicate with stakeholders, communicate with the users, with everyone. And one of the most important things to do is establish those communications, break down the silos. And I would say, okay, be the sales. Okay, we have some sales. No, again, I'm kidding. You have to collaborate with that as well. You have to streamline these communications and make sure that everyone's aligned and everyone's doing their job very good. So you have to provide all the data, as Nikki Forrest mentioned before. You have to take care of all the data. And yeah, that's it. It's a good beginning, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And what should be your first hire if you were to build out a proper product ops team?
That's interesting. Okay. First, you have to understand what the product ops team. So basically, if you are a small startup, then you have to understand what are your needs. For example, if your product ops team needs to analyze more the data, then I will get a designer or someone the UX, for example, to analyze all the data, or to hire a developer to manage all the processes we have. It depends on the startup and what are the processes that you need to manage. So the first step is to identify all the processes, see how to automate all these processes, and then the right people with the right background. So if you need more background in development, then yeah, it should be a developer. In the end, there's no clear role for product ops. Not like you study to become a product ops manager or something, or executive. You have to make a transition from your existing role to the product ops team.
Interesting. And that, once again, leads me perfectly to my next question for George. As a developer, can you go into your experience how as a product manager versus a developer, and where you kind of draw the line with things like that?
Well, yeah, I think it's not actually a chance that both of us, not both, actually most of the people, the lead trainers, have gone through different roles. I think it showcases that, if you want to actually engage what PLG means and what makes successful products, and by that meaning successful companies, is to understand more and more of what you're building. So, you have to think like an owner. So the main things I gained from as a product manager experience was that, all these challenges that you have to do when you talk to clients, when you try to sit down with the designers in brainstorming sessions, when you're trying to figure out what's the best solution for what customers need, or when you analyze your data and you see that, probably you have to pivot or you have to let a feature go, which is always sad. And, all these things before the product-led era, engineers weren't really involved into that. So it's strange because actually for me, I think the issue is like a waste of resources. So we have all these great superpowers as engineers. That's why I also love my engineering role and I returned back. But, usually we were the guys who were just told what to build and never actually figuring out why and all the other questions that are actually important. So that helped me to get back to my engineering manager role with all that knowledge that I gained from a product manager role, and trying to preach to people, engage them, engage my engineers into thinking like an owner, into understanding why we build what we're building, have common sessions with designers, which wasn't the case most of the time in most of the companies I've worked with. And actually, instead of prototyping, having designers analyzing why we've chosen a specific design, what was the failed attempts, what was the reasoning behind that, and everything. Same with roles like Emma's, sit down with customer support, or even doing straight face-to-face client customer session feedback. All these things I wouldn't have known if I hadn't crossed the line and get to the other side. But yeah, I think it's important that most of us here have this diverse experience. That's what makes the difference.
Absolutely. And as an engineering manager that has never had that product experience, what would really help change their minds to become product-led growth focused, or even to create a new design, create a new feature? What is really the core reasons, or how to actually influence other engineers?
I think first of all is to press on the button of curiosity. I think what makes a good engineer is that he's always curious and he wants to learn. So I think that if you start asking questions like, why did you build like that? Or, did you ever push back? Or did you ever did you ever have a second thought and stuff like that? Then, if you're not really interested or engaged as an engineer by then you don't have a straight answer, right? So that's the first point. And then there are ways that you should try to make, usually the other people in the other departments, they say, okay, engineers are what we call the geeks, or they speak their own language. So another part of it is when you ask an engineer and he will tell you the exact same thing for, Emma or John or Nikiforos. So you're trying and you say, okay, why don't we use a ubiquitous language? So why don't we bring out all these business experts, sit down with us, explain us what we built, why we're building it, and then use one common language that can even be down to the code that we write, right? So we will use the same terms that John is using to actually write code. So that's the second approach. And then, by nature, you become more engaged. And then the third approach would be to actually involve them with the KPIs. You've seen dashboards and, product people are, always crazy about building huge dashboards, looking into everything and stuff like that. But where do these data come from? They came from the engineering department, right? So instead of having these guys that actually collect the data, why leave them there? Why not make them engage them into the process of also understanding the data, so they have a better monitor over the data, and they might actually see all these tiny details that you usually tend to miss when you have all these huge dashboards. So then you become part of the prioritization, you become part of the roadmap, you start engaging your product roadmap with your technical roadmap and stuff like that. So summarize, I think it's 3 bullets. Get your curiosity done, use a common language so we can understand each other, and let the data guide us.
I love that. I love that because it also helps get the whole department involved and creates consistency across the board. So that's fantastic. All right, to switch gears a little, I'd like to go to Emma. Can you explain to me what the core difference is between B2B customer success and B2C?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on what your approach is going to be. So depending on whether you have businesses as your customer base or just individuals, there's a scale to customer success. So it can go from what we call tech touch, which is more low touch. That is more in line with like a product-led growth, like standard approach, because it's coming from the product. You probably have seen it around like product-led growth onboarding models, but then it can go up to high touch for customer success, and that's going to be more involving a human being like me and really trying to understand the customer. So there's full levels of personalization, obviously, on both sides. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a product-led approach. But that's then where what's going to be the most appropriate depending on who your customer base is. So probably really generalizing, B2C probably tends to be more tech touch because that's more scalable. Say if it was like an app from, the Apple Store or Play Store, you've got people doing trials and all sorts of things. You could have thousands and millions of people that sign up and have a go. And so you've got to get them while you've got them. Whereas if it's more B2B, depending again on who your customers are, they could be quite mature, traditional companies where the maybe tech touch model might not be as appropriate, or they might have different sorts of expectations as to having a point of contact as they onboard, and having regular touch points. So like QBRs, quarterly business reviews is like a common thing in customer success teams. So I'd say that those were the key differences, but it really does depend on who actually is your customer, and what do they need, what are their expectations as to what you're going to deliver them.
Awesome. And just talking about the onboarding process, how involved should customer success actually be in onboarding, and how does that relate to PLG?
So I have had this question of, well, product-led growth model is obviously the product doing all of the onboarding. So you shouldn't then necessarily need anyone else, whether that be customer success or like professional services, whoever it might be in your organization supporting. But I would argue that, we've seen the rise in product-led growth alongside the rise of customer success, and it's really starting to be embedded in a lot of product-led organizations now. And so I think that customer success can then complement the in-app onboarding or the whatever's happening inside your product when it comes to onboarding. Either just simply because customer success have more touch points with customers and feedback coming in the direction from the customer as opposed to product reaching out to the customer. So we can help feedback into the onboarding process and help improve it or make it more effective. But also sometimes you just need a human, depending on what your product is. You can't be picking up the phone and having a chat with someone and talking things through. Sometimes that's all you need to really get that level of understanding as they onboard.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think there are a lot of customers that still want a human touch and want to get on the phone with their CSM and talk through things and do team trainings and all of that. So fantastic. And my last question for you is, what metrics should customer success really be interested in?
So I think but like I said, customer success is just so new as a concept, and organizations have various stages of what customer success teams look like for them. And also their data is in different stages of clarity or accessibility as well. The obvious one is product usage is so important for customer success to understand. It will play into the health scores of your customer. How are they using the product? Are they using things that they should be, that they have access to, that you think will make them be successful? But also that complements things like engagement as well, which can be tracked elsewhere. I would say the common other metrics customer success are probably interested in is around like churn rates and retention rates. So customer lifetime value being one of them. The net renewal rate, which will include your expansions and your contractions of your accounts, and then equally your growth rate, which doesn't include those expansions and contractions. I'd say those across the board probably, you're going to track that in some way, whether you call them those things or not. And then the rest is kind of depending on what's important to your organization and what kind of metrics you want to track or tweak. So things like logo retention, net promoter scores, if you're doing things like surveys and things like that, CSAT surveys too. So tracking that sort of scores of engagement levels. And then also cost of retention. So from a sales-led model, and most companies should track customer acquisition cost. But at the same time, if you're trying to justify growing your customer success teams and showing how they contribute to your product-led growth strategy, then cost of retention could also be something to keep an eye on as well.
I love that you covered many different metrics there. I think that customer success usually gets thrown into, okay, measure churn, but churn is such a factor that measuring engagement really should be number one, because if we measure engagement, it's going to actually lead to churn. So
absolutely.
I love that. All right. Now, Nikki Forrest, I do have some questions about PLG design, PLG and design. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of having a product-led growth focused design team?
I mean, there is usually you can say many things about the PLG and how you can incorporate it. But I mean, for me, the best thing that happened with PLG principles is basically that we as designers can do many things with the data that we get. So it's somehow something like cutting corners into very difficult tasks. And we can, for example, do more data-driven testing on features, or get all those, instead of getting all those random data from random corners, now it's in one place, so we can have access easier, and this eventually helps our job becomes even better, and deliver better features and better designs on that with less problems during the flows, or the UX is better, the UI is better, the user can find easily what he's looking for, all those things.
Awesome. And how did you actually shift your focus from design to management teams?
I mean, I'm a strong believer of, you should eventually pass the torch to someone else. So, as I grow older, there are other designers that are younger, more eager to learn, more passionate about design. They're raw material. So basically, my concept was eventually I started to, go a little bit away from the design process and trying to actually pass the knowledge that I have gained through my experiences to other people, to other designers, in order for them eventually, to continue the circle of trust and pass the knowledge to other designers and expand that beautiful field of design.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that you are, once again, including the entire team and actually being able to manage, but still share that PLG growth or PLG within the entire department.
Yeah, I mean, being a sole designer and having that, narrow mind and into that thing that, we tend to actually feel that every feature we design is our child. And usually we don't like to be, tell us that, okay, this is not working. So if you involve the team during that process, you have, more opinions So, and if you're open to feedback, you're getting even better and better. You're constantly evolving as a designer and as an individual, of course.
And how do you actually get the team involved with things like that?
When I saw them, the answer is super simple and super exciting, because when I saw them that the power of data and that we can have the data easily and the data we crave for, instead of, hustling on getting to try to book meetings and get some customer feedback or try to get meetings to discuss with engineering. And when we managed to find a way with PLG to actually streamline that process, everybody was on board. All the process was super simple after that.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's how PLG really should work. I'd also love to hear from the audience as well, how they were able to convince their team to start going with a PLG model and work within management on that too. I think it's a very tough thing to get implemented, but once it's done, people love it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'd like to also open the floor to questions from our audience. So we already have some, but I'd like to ask the PLG trainers here, when might a PLG strategy not make sense for a B2B business?
Okay, I can easily start answering this question. Basically, you have to define what's your business exactly. I guess we're talking about the software as a service company. So in the end, you're building a digital product, right? So it's not like a paper company or something. You're building a solid product. And then you have to identify what your customers and how do they interact with your product. So for example, you have a customer that gets, some kind of report. This is what comes to mind on my mind, like first. For example, if I have a customer that is not very tech savvy and does not use any devices except from their phone, for example, they get some kind of reports or they get disengagement some other way. So you have to find a way to bring them closer. So, for example, we have many clients in our organization that they're using their phone only. They don't interact with our application through their laptop or through our app. So our goal here is to transform somehow the product so that we can provide all the information on the device they're using. If they're using their email, then yes, let's build more, email-oriented services or features to send notifications. If they have some different reports, then okay, let's go with that. It's important to identify what our users are and how they're using our product. This is why we should work closely with the UX department to tell us exactly that. And then take the decision from there. And of course, I think you should make a lot of A/B testing. You should be clear if you should be PLG or not. I think it's hard nowadays if you have a SaaS.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, almost all SaaS companies should probably be PLG focused. But this does kind of go into our next question. Emma, if product growth is actually working and you've already implemented it and you're getting feedback, the team is building products based on PLG and PLG groundwork foundation, why does a team actually need customer success? Why would you want that if it's all working?
Yeah, and I think, if you read it at just that high definition level of what product-led growth means and what customer success means, you can see that it doesn't seem like they would work together. But I think it's actually the opposite. I think that because SaaS companies this has been around for so long, but finally realizing that in order to be a successful company, you need to have successful customers. So you need a product that makes them successful. And that is why we're seeing the rise of customer success teams, because it's not how many people you can fill at the top of the funnel. It's actually how many can you retain and grow with your business, with your products as they grow as well. So I actually don't think that they do contradict. I think they have grown over time together because they are basically the same thing. They're SaaS companies and organizations with products saying that the success of our customers is at the heart of our business, and we will only be successful if you are. So let's work together in understanding that. And so, like I mentioned before, with specifically around onboarding, but this maps to even retention and expansion of accounts and your customer base. You know, customer success and your teams actually complement the product-led approach. So because we are at the forefront and speaking with customers day to day, all the time, whether that, you know, it might not necessarily be like on phone calls, it could be doing research or emails or whatever it might be, we're actually hearing the feedback that's coming in, so we can share that to product, because product are working at that more strategic level in the business. They've got to correspond with the exec, they've got to correspond with marketing, they've got to correspond with design engineers. You know, there's just not enough time in the day. You can never have too many touch points with your customers, as long as it's not annoying them. So that's where customer success comes in. We can absorb all that feedback. We can pass it on to the product teams and the rest of the business to help them do their jobs better. And then, like I mentioned with onboarding, but also it comes into maybe expanding your customers and retaining them, is how can humans complement that tech touch process? How can we either help to inform that, but also complement that as well? So I think they've risen together as opposed to being the opposite.
Absolutely. But when you go for a tech touch model, it also tends to be a low touch model. How do you make sure that you get enough feedback coming in?
Yeah, so I think I'm a big proponent of just making sure that however customers want to share feedback with you, that you let them. So I know it's really easy, and this is what my talk is about later on in the week. It's really easy to think about getting feedback just from your business perspective. So what's going to make our lives easier so that we don't have like hundreds of pieces of feedback to review every week or whatever it might be. And actually that's missing the point. The point of gathering feedback is making sure that customers know how to share their feedback with you. If you only ever ask them specific questions about what you're interested in hearing, you could miss a brand new product or feature or module that you would never have even thought about. So I think just making sure that you understand your customer base and how they want to give feedback. And if it's tech touch, you know, there's plenty of in-app chat systems that you can add to your product, or making sure that you use a help center system that people can send tickets to, and just being really responsive in that way. Other companies really like the forum route. Personally, I hate that, but that's another option as well.
Fantastic. And every person on this panel has talked about data and data collection. When we get customer feedback, we need to aggregate that data. How do you actually share that with all of your other departments at the company?
I can take the lead here. Actually, just before I answer that, I want to second what Emma said and just underline the importance that there is no holy grail. So there's nothing you can do to have the perfect design, to have the perfect product that will, you know, onboard by itself the people. You can go as far as you can, but there are always going to be these people that are going to need some help, or they're going to need someone to talk to. And also remember that products do evolve as humans and also as software and stuff like that. So since you have an evolving process, you never know where you're going to hit the net gates, or you never know who is not going to figure out what you think as your next step in your product. So I think it's imperative to have a customer success product, and I've worked with these departments with huge success in the past, and I really appreciate what they're bringing into the product-led growth era. So now for your question, usually, you know, since we're talking about, we didn't talk only about data though. We talked also about how we have to bring down these silos. So now information is clearly and more transparently shared around. So all these dashboards that we were talking previously, as we said, now engineers should also understand, and customer success people should also understand, and everyone who participates in the roadmap of the product should also understand. So we should define a common language again, a set of KPIs that we say are interesting for you know, even the executive leadership team, the C-level, down to an engineer level. Obviously, someone can have its own KPIs or its own metrics that they can focus more, like finance or sales or even engineering. But the general KPIs that show the growth or where the product is going or where the milestone features are going should be shared across the board. And so I think another principle that's key on the PLG era is that we're talking about transparency here. breaking down silos is not only about communication, but it's also about transparency. And so data should flow around in the form of either KPIs or, having a common language of reasoning around what's going on our product.
That makes sense. It makes sense to have different dashboards where everybody can see why decisions are being made. I'd like to know how you actually convinced your engineers to follow those PLG principles.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, I said I would love to know how to actually convince your engineers to follow those PLG principles.
Yep.
Is it just through the data, or do you have to have a talk as well?
No, as we said before, is around these 3 key principles of sharing information, having a common language, and thinking like an owner. For me, the most key principle, no matter if you want to follow PLG or not, no matter if you think you're an agile-led or not, I think that thinking like an owner is the most important part for every department. Because if you don't feel that ownership, then you don't really care about the product, and all these little things that we're talking now, which are important, don't make sense to you. So what I usually preach to my engineers is like to push back, ask me more questions. When we're planning stuff, or we're talking about roadmap, or we're even doing estimations, or we're reading these dashboards that we just previously talked about, I want them to ask questions. I want them to, try to discover even more every day. And obviously, it's my responsibility to come back either with the right answers or with the correct amount of information, planning ahead, get them into the process. As soon as someone is into the process and feels the bigger picture and understands that he's not there just, and especially for engineers, it's easy to feel isolated in a basement. You just type code in your keyboard, you produce your results, you get paid, that's it. As soon as you feel that there's something more asked from you and that there's something more going on around and you can become part of it, I think it's human nature to want to engage.
Fantastic. And then how do you actually convince your executives to switch towards a PLG model in regards to product management or even this voice of customer?
I can start on that. Basically, executives is the hardest part, I think, because it's like, from my point of view, the executives are the ones that are furthest away from the product, usually. And so to convince the executives, it's a process where you have to go slow, because it's about the mindset. And I think that the first step is to work with the surrounding teams, like, for example, the ones that we're talking about right now, design, engineering, and the customer success, and start from there. So as George mentioned, it's important to convince first engineers to work towards the product and make all this transparency, the information flow, and make sure that they have the big picture. And then work closely with the customer success team, with Emma's team. It's very important to understand that having a PLG principle, it's a lot easier in the long run. So they have to understand that this is towards something nice, and automate all the process that they can. Because, for example, if always my challenge is what happens if tomorrow we have double the customers, then okay, customer success will go crazy. Crazy. So what will happen there if you're not PLG? And it's like what they say, it's a successful failure. Okay, you failed because you cannot serve your customers, and they're so happy, but you cannot talk with them. So yeah, you should convince, of course, the customer success, and then user experience and the design team, as Nikiforos said, is very important. I think they're already convinced because they're about the data and the product. And then convincing all these departments goes slowly to the executive, because then you can say, hey, look at all this automation that we do. Look, now that we shift the product towards in the middle of your organization and everything is going great, everything is going well. We have so much customers, and we serve them without any issues. And then they will start sitting as well. It's all about mindset in the end. But you should be patient. It's very important to be patient.
All right, that's awesome. I mean, what's fantastic about that is that you do take a bottom-up approach rather than top-down. And you mentioned each one of the core departments. I think naturally customer success, we tend to be product-led. Like, we're like, oh, customer feedback, here it is. And we share it with everyone. but then you also have to convince the engineers and the design team. I'm going to ask one question from the audience, and then I'm going to hop back into this question that I have. But what is the opposite of product-led growth? So, or what are the ways that what are other ways of growing, and why are they no longer suitable for B2B?
I can take this one first off. So traditionally, or before product-led growth, it was predominantly sales-led. So back in the day, you would buy your CD-ROM and it would have your software on it, and it would never change. And so software companies just predominantly just needed you to buy the product in the first place. But as we've obviously moved software onto the cloud, and it can be accessed anywhere by anyone, and we have more of a subscription model, that is how we've moved into the product-led approach, because it's really important that you are constantly evolving and improving your products, and making sure that it is fit for purpose and making your customers successful. Like even like the gaming industry now, you don't just buy a game and that's it. You know, it changes like every week or so. They're always adding to updates and stuff. So essentially what we've left in the past is this sales-led approach, which still sits around sometimes. Some product teams are tempted to build things because one person has suggested it. But the much better approach that obviously we're all talking about today is making sure that your products are fit for making all of your customers successful.
Yeah. And also the way that you vision your product to be in the future too.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I think it's really important to make sure that you not only not build a feature for one customer, but the customer also doesn't get to pay for it. Like you build it for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like having a clear vision and strategy for your product and your organization that every department can get behind is really essential to this.
Yes, definitely. All right. Nikki Forrest, because we've already heard from how the engineering team and how the product team and customer success team are able to go product-led, can you talk a little bit about how you were able to convince your design team to turn into product-led growth?
Here it was really easy because I was starting to slowly preach that framework. For them it was a bit at the beginning was like, hey, what is this? I mean, what are you trying to do? You're trying to shift the whole company, or you're trying to shift those things won't fly. But gradually, since we found ways to communicate across the companies and across the company and across the departments, it was very good to actually, design something, go to an engineer, and that engineer shuts you down because that thing that you were designing was not feasible. And then you need to go back, and try to find something that is equally good, but it's feasible from the engineering perspective. So it was super easy to convince the team to join that mindset because we remove, the barriers, and we become from, the guys that in the back of the room doing the crazy stuff, the crazy designs and stuff like that, into a more team in the broader sense of it. We can easily go to ask an opinion for, customer success. We can easily ask an opinion for some feature or a new animation that we want to do to a developer. And then, that back and forth, it was super creative at the end of the day.
And how did you keep those lines of communication open between the different departments?
Constantly moving.
And as the world has turned more remote, have you turned to using things more like Slack, or have you?
Yeah, we're using in my team. We're using a lot of Slack and again a lot of Zoom because we're always seeking a bit of feedback. It's like, hey, I designed that. How is it good? Do you like it? Need something? Or I'm stuck here. Can you help me? And it's interesting because when we move out from the design team and send that to an engineer, for example, or the customer success team, or even in the marketing team, you get feedback that you're not expecting, for sure. They see stuff that there's no way for you to see, and that drives your mojo as a designer to create something that is even better, so everybody can understand. So it's always that communicational thing here and there.
Awesome. I love that. I mean, as the world is turning more and more remote, it's becoming important to still have that face-to-face connection as well. So great. I would like to once again ask about how you guys are managing everything and being still PLG in the times of COVID. So how do you actually create those dashboards if you didn't have them beforehand? How do you take the customer feedback, aggregate it, and create transparency across the board?
Well, I'll take that as a first step, and then you guys can say. But the thing, especially for engineering and designers, which we sort of used to have the same approach by the other teams. We used to work like that. So we used to work remotely. We used to work with our laptops, as Nikifor said, moving around a lot, using Slack, using remote communication. And I think that all these tools, mainly used by these gigs, are now so widespread and used by so many people. We've all seen what has happened with Zoom, how Google tried to respond in a flash with Google Meet, supporting even more people and stuff like that. So I think, it's the principles that stay. COVID just enforced some of these tools, which people probably were not even aware about, or people didn't think they really helped. So sharing a screen wasn't the same as having a meeting or doing a workshop like we're doing right now. Someone might think that there's more value into having a physical presence, which it's not to say that there isn't, but for the principles, it doesn't make any difference. So it's the principles that guide you how to work, and your work ethics and the team spirit and the team collaboration. All these things, are ancient old principles. We just now transform them. We figure out new ways. That's why we're preaching here PLG, but the rest is just tools. So the tools are here. And I think that the COVID just make them, more important. That's that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm really lucky. I work at ProdPad. We're a product management software, and so we are our own dog food, and we use ProdPad every day. And our approach at ProdPad as a tool as well as a company is product led. So we have outcome focused roadmaps that everyone has access to. I understand the problems we're looking to solve, and we could iterate on that depending on whether it's a pandemic or some user research we do. We can really iterate and be agile, and I'm lucky that we can easily add that feedback in and connect the dots between our product backlog and our outcome focused roadmap. So I'd agree. The principles of an organization always stay, and then it's like, how can you adapt then to the situations that you're thrown in?
Fantastic. And what are the big changes that you should see when you make the transition to being a product-led organization?
A lot more happier customers.
Would you be able to monitor that through NPS, do you believe?
So personally at ProdPad, we don't use NPS, but definitely through feedback in some form. However, you're already tracking positive feedback or retention. However you're tracking that, health scores, engagement, retention, then you should see that should uplift, because you're essentially listening to your customers and giving them what they need to be successful.
Awesome.
And I'll add to that. Well, in GWI, we actually do measure NPS, and we've seen it driven into really high levels when we, shifted into more PLG principles. And also we've seen not only more happy customers, but actually customers that were eager to give you feedback, use your product in better ways, or actually give you feedback around pivots, like, meaningful features that, and not just, non-meaningful feedback or non-constructive feedback, like around, moaning about colors or hidden buttons, stuff like, because these things do happen, right? But when you're focused and you're having all these sessions, you go past that, and customers are actually, when they understand your value proposition better, they actually give you real life examples of what they would think they can do more with your product. And for me, that's gold. When a customer comes and tells you, we would like to do all these things with your product, we know they're not there, but just have a thing about them. And then, that's when all the crazy stuff for engineering, doing proof of concepts, designers, product managers coming in, doing that dual track, agile discovery phase. I think that's what PLG is about. You get more active, more meaningful feedback by having better customers, more engaged customers, more happy customers.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned earlier that your customers, you shouldn't ask prodding questions. You should just be trying to get their feedback in a very natural way. Are there any times that you would ask those questions to try to get more feedback from them, or any direct questions?
I guess I think John can also answer that. I'll just say that from my experience as a product manager also, it really depends when you are in your product phase. So are you an established product and you're building new features, then probably you know your ways, and you can have beta phases or even alpha phases where you essentially asking but not directly. So you're giving private access or privileged access to new features and stuff like that. And then you're having all these engineering processes, all these flows, they get in captures, they flow, the data flow into these A/B testing dashboards or KPIs, NPS dashboards, and you understand what's going on. But if you're starting now and you're a startup and you're having an MVP, then probably you would need to sit down with some of your customers and really direct ask them. And I think that shows interest, and it shows that you really do care about it. But it really depends. There's always some form of asking. But direct asking, I think it really depends who you are and if you're just starting.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I think the information that you shared was extremely informative and very applicable. People can just start immediately with it. So thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Have a good day, bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So once again, in case you've yet to do so, be sure to register for the PLG Academy so you can have access to all of the sessions today and get lifetime access to all of the materials so you can stream it whenever you like. The link is below and you can sign up. So that was really wonderful. We got to learn a lot about PLG and from the trainers. Moving forward to our next session, let's welcome our panel. We are going to be discussing COVID and PLG and the future of SaaS. So we have Ilias, he is the co-founder and CEO of OWIWI. We have Sujan Patel, he's the co-founder of Mailshake. We have Andy Mura, he's the head of marketing at EXB Group. We have Semi, who is the VP of sales at Signal Group, and James McWalter, the director of growth at Respondent. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Hey.
Pleasure to be here.
Hi there.
Hi there.
All right, so I'd love to start off with you, Ilias, and ask how being a founder at a successful startup that is interrelated with human resources, which trends that you are seeing in the SaaS industry during this COVID pandemic?
Well, it's been an extremely interesting sort of quarter, so to speak. I don't think any of us were really prepared for what happened and how things transpired. I feel like I have to say as a sort of disclaimer beforehand that HR departments are not used to seeing innovation. It's what I believe to be one of the most sort of innovation-starved functions of business. So to me, the way that I saw COVID and trying to remain optimistic as well is that this was a great opportunity for them to get up to speed with the amount of technology and the amount of tools that are out there and available. And that they immediately sort of reached a new level of sort of and a new style of working from home. In general terms, what we saw was that pre-COVID rather, it was an extremely interesting field that was growing tremendously. Obviously, COVID put a huge stop on that, and especially with regards to recruitment. But now we're starting to see that, well, for the first case, there were a lot of companies that adapted really fast and in fact didn't sort of pause or change their operations. And only now recently can I say that I've seen a lot more companies sort of getting back into the rhythm and into the spirit of sort of recovering from the crisis. But with that being said, for OWIWI was actually a sort of super busy period for us. Because the one aspect of recruitment that we could continue doing without sort of causing any delays was the actual screening part, which could happen all online. Obviously, this was further facilitated then by video interviewing tools, which and other tools like Zoom, for example, that really experienced tremendous waves of growth. But all in all, it's something that I like to see the positives out of this experience, and I think that as far as OWIWI is concerned, we were able to sort of remain relevant despite the crisis in many ways.
Wow, that's fantastic. And to be very specific, have there been any verticals, or which vertical in particular has shown growth despite this pandemic?
Well, for the most part, video interviewing tools have seen a tremendous rate of growth.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I've noticed, and particular screening tools, because it's either for trying to use it in order to facilitate your hiring decisions, or to buy yourself some time with the candidates that have applied for a position and are now sort of on hold and frozen. I think it was a very sort of anything to do, especially with employee engagement and culture assessment. Also, I think saw high waves of growth. Other tools like applicant tracking systems, not so much, because most departments and most companies were using those already. But for the most part, I would say things that facilitated the screening process and anything else to do with it sort of engaging with the existing workforce. And that could be a myriad of different things. It could be culture-based assessments, or it could be training and development, another sort of area that saw a lot of growth because the time was well spent. Although most of the time there, it would happen through sort of the bigger providers like LinkedIn. So that's at least from what I saw from my observation.
Awesome. And do you think that these trends are here to stay, or will they dominate the future?
I hope they stay. It's like what I said, HR hasn't seen a lot of innovation. So it's really nice to see how HR managers are becoming more and more well-oriented with technology, and that they're becoming more comfortable. I understand the argument that, HR and business in general is people-oriented. But the use of technology was something that was, I think, lacking in existing processes. So I think that now with what's happened is HR managers will be better equipped and able to adapt more quickly to new technologies and new trends. And I think it was a good wake-up call in some ways.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Especially, I just saw the news that a lot of our big tech companies like Twitter or Facebook, they're allowing their employees to even remain remote afterwards. So I wonder how that's going to change the hiring process for those teams too. Yeah,
well, one of the things is that, especially in Greece, working from home was not sort of it wasn't an established way of working. Obviously, there's a lot of companies that do it, and especially startups. It's something that, if you're accustomed to it, like we are, it was business as usual. There was no disruption in that case. But I would like to think that many companies, not just in Greece, around the world, will be able to adopt these practices and establish them as sort of, go-to policies. Because at the end of the day, I think what helped facilitate that is the fact that, most people don't like remote working because they can't supervise or micromanage their employees. So there's the aspect of trust. Whereas, given the circumstances, you had to believe that the other person was doing their job. And I think that once managers saw that people were, in some cases, even more productive than they were beforehand, that was real food for thought for them to say, wait a minute, maybe we can actually keep some of the workforce working remotely. And then since that makes them happy, even better for us. Others cannot adapt to working from home. So we have to definitely bring them back to the office and maybe follow up with some kind of other initiative if they're at risk. Psychologically speaking, from working from home, and then you'll have the people who perform in both cases, and you can provide a more flexible working environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it'll be interesting to see how the future pans out.
Yeah, same here.
All right, Andy. Hi. So being an expert in digital transformation and a SaaS marketing leader with heavy experience in the field, what do you think are going to be the effects of the digital transformation in our industry?
Well, I guess like digital transformation right now, it went from being just a general concept, something that you would see like on paper, right, to something that companies realize, okay, it's something concrete, it's something that requires us to change processes, right? So up to, a few months ago, everybody says, okay, we are trying to digitize our business. We are proceeding, we have digital transformation processes and transformation in place and stuff like that. But they never realized what that actually entails, right? So it was more like a lot of words, buzzwords, and customer experience, customer journey mapping, and stuff like that, until you realize that suddenly your customers are not going to come to you, right? So you have to be available anytime, anywhere. So it's the first time that companies realized what digital transformation actually is, right? So having this kind of like digital interface and processes so that everything happens like frictionless, right? So we need this kind of frictionless transactions throughout the customer journey. And for the first time, you really see what it means, right? In the previous session, you guys talked about high touch and low touch onboarding and processes and stuff like that. Right now, everything one-to-one communication happens remotely in one way or another, and everything from negotiations to implementation to deployment to strategy occurs like remotely, and companies like winners of this let's say disruption are those companies that either already had processes in place to interact with customers like that, or companies which are quickly adapting to the new environment.
And have you spoken to companies that did not have that in place, and how are they adapting?
Yes, unfortunately. There are a few companies that are not able to cope with the current situation because of either regulations, right? Especially when it comes to enterprise customers and stuff like that. And you have like a bunch of regulations that limits the scope of action when it comes to transformation and digital processes, or because of internal decision-making processes. And, especially old-fashioned companies, it takes forever to actually change something. But you know what? In a way, it's kind of positive because, as mentioned multiple times, companies are visiting the whole perspective on how they carry out operations, right? And you see that on both sides, right? So vendors and customers. What I noticed, that's really interesting, is that there's this kind of no BS culture right now, because people are a lot more cautious, right, when they buy a new solution. So in the past, you would go there with your product and you had a great demo or something like that. People would test it out and so on, and they would just give it a go. Right now, we have to be a lot more cautious, both because we don't have the budget we used to have to purchase technology. Secondly, because we don't have the time. We have a lot of other problems to take care of. So at the same time, people who are like decision makers, when they introduce technology, they're a lot more careful, and they really have this kind of like new attitude, which is right. It doesn't matter what you tell me or what I see. I want to see an immediate effect, right? So this kind of like change in attitude in the purchase, like in the decision-making process and in the purchasing process. It's really interesting. And that forces companies to really deliver on the promises they make, which is good, right? It's very positive. And companies are adapting dramatically. So and like refocusing on their positioning, refocusing on their, for example, content and how they can provide immediate value. You can't say just, we can start now, and because the situation requires companies to act quickly, and so companies are adapting.
One of those things that I've noticed is all of the companies, even clothing companies, they're responding with emails being like, this is our response to the COVID pandemic, and they're trying to adapt as well with that. So I think it's really interesting. Given this adapting, do you think that there's going to be a rise towards the PLG transformation in the future?
Say it again, sorry.
Do you think that there will be a rise towards PLG?
Yes and no. I guess it's funny that this kind of crisis also showed the importance of this kind of direct relationship with the customers, right? So yes, definitely your product has to convince. Your product has the everything has to be centered to deliver an extraordinary product experience. But at the same time, we also see how we miss this kind of connection with people and the whole process, the old processes of really interacting throughout different stages. And I guess it really depends on the company size, right? For example, enterprise customers, they're slowly decentralizing purchasing decisions and stuff like that, but you still need this kind of old-fashioned marketing sales approach, let's say, together with your product-led strategy, right? So yes, definitely. But at the same time, with SMBs and smaller companies, absolutely, PLG is still going to be the trend over time.
All right, good. And considering that user experience is the number one criteria for B2B organizations and B2C as well, can you talk about how COVID has actually changed that?
Well, I think companies, obviously, so right now, first of all, I think there's a big problem in taking care of customers, right? So also for companies that have a limited number of people who can work, and organizing different structures and different teams is a bit more complicated. So obviously, people rely on fantastic products that sell themselves and the users can interact with independently, right? And at the same time, think about it, there's a huge problem right now also with training technology. As for example, I can introduce new software in my company, but my team now is scattered everywhere. So I have to make sure that people will end up understanding how the new solution works and how it and how they can profit from it. So basically, new vendors either have specific solutions in place to carry out for example, remote training of some sort or they have a extremely intuitive user interface, which also makes the whole user experience a bit more frictionless, or they have systems in place like a digital adoption platform or something like that to make sure it works more effortlessly for the end users. And but generally speaking, user experience still remains one of the USPs, especially with SMBs, obviously. But we see that slowly also in enterprise customers, right? And enterprise customers, a few years ago, they didn't have that kind of decision, they didn't have scope for decision like SMBs, right? They would choose a solution that would integrate with legacy systems. There are still companies out there with Windows 2000, right? So and ME or whatever, and Vista. Oh my God! And
Internet Explorer.
Well, that's actually the norm in most of the companies. Yeah. Actually, enterprise for customers, Internet Explorer or maybe Edge. Whoa, and the fact is that these companies before they had to deal only with problems connected to legacy systems and stuff like that, so there was no choice. Now that they're opening up a little bit, obviously, even for such large customers, the choice is always what makes my users happier, because employees often complain, and employee experience is becoming an important component of the whole digital transformation. And if the employee experience is bad, companies know people will leave, and eventually they will also use UX as the important criterion to choose a solution.
I love that. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Sujan, I'd love to move over to you. Being that you have been a founder 4 times and you're deep into growth, what do you think is going to be the next steps in the SaaS industry?
Is that for me? Sorry, I missed okay. What's the next steps in the SaaS industry? Is that what you said?
Yeah, given the whole COVID pandemic, what do you think the next steps in the SaaS industry will be?
Yeah, I think the big thing I've seen is, or at least what I'm seeing is that SaaS companies need to go from nice to have or nice to helpful to being critical, right? So really it's a trend that has started a while ago with how easy it is to build a SaaS company, that with something like Stripe and those things have been much easier. Now it's even easier because the adoption of SaaS to get to $1 million ARR, to get to size or some scale. And there's a lot more competition. So there's now fiercer competition. So I think really it's like the trend of doubling down on product-led growth or focusing on a product needs to happen, and the transition from nice to have to must have. COVID just kind of kickstarted that thing because people now all of a sudden have to really focus on the bottom line. Like at our companies, the first thing we looked at before even thinking about human, like our team and cutting anything related to that or even making a plan, it's, hey, where are we spending money, right? Like, what are the tools we use? What's the ROI of the tools we use? And I can tell you that we never really had to justify the ROI. Usually that's justified when starting to use the software in the first place. And I can imagine this is trickling down to a lot of other companies as well.
And how are you going about measuring the ROI of tools that maybe do not provide you the metrics?
Well, there's always a metric. I think there's always or should be a metric that is assigned to a something you do, right? So, for example, we're looking at, should we be doing chatbots as a way to just on our site, because chatbot technology is very expensive. It's hundreds of thousands a month. Is it just easier or better just to do live chat and offer support when that happens? So the question is, like, how do we measure live chat's effectiveness? Then we have to go back to our sales and marketing teams and look at, like, okay, is live chat or chatbots triggering phone calls or like demos? How many of those customers who have engaged with the chatbot converted, and what is that normal conversion rate without that? And just looking at the same stats I would look at in a normal marketing funnel, but now applying it specifically to those users engaged in that, and then factoring in that cost. Now, I can tell you, about 30 minutes ago, I just got off the horn with my marketing team, and I would say we pay about $700 a month we use Drift. And the number of demos that we book and the number of how much revenue that comes through our chatbot is way greater than that cost. To be like, let's not mess with that, right? But we went through that same type of exercise with any software that we're paying any more than like $50 a month for.
Wow, that's incredible. So would you recommend first starting with a monthly subscription and then moving over to an annual subscription so you can have that time to really measure the ROI within your company?
So I prefer monthly subscriptions across the board. Okay. Although annuals are great, you could save from somewhere between 10 to 25%. You lose the nimbleness to move to a software that is better, right? So let's say 6 months into, whatever you're 1 year into buying a product, what if you find that you need to move to the left and go completely with a different tool, or some other, opportunity exists that or is created that allows you to do something you didn't do before? I'd say that opportunity cost is not worth the 10-25% savings.
Interesting. And do you have any lessons that you've learned or any how-tos in regarding to coping with the pandemic's effects that you'd love to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've learned through this whole process is how quickly and how effectively a team can move. And if we could just operate at that level 100% of the time, all the time, it would just be amazing. I think we can just get a lot more done, right? So what I mean by this is it's very easy for people to get comfortable and then take time to make decisions. So we within a week, our leadership team, which is 4 people, we're about 20 person company. We've got about like 50,000 customers. I'm saying this for reference. We were able to come up with like a 3 different financial like kind of forecast based off of what will happen in whatever with COVID. We're just making like predictions of like, okay, moderate, really bad, horrible, holy crap, this company's never going to make it, and we were able to figure out models really, really quickly. So I think in times of need or kind of struggle, people rise to the occasion, or generally can rise to the occasion. And I'd say what I've learned is when you make it through this hard time, if you could just continue to operate at that level, you will be able to just overcome a lot of other things or operate just at a higher function. And then on the marketing or non-leadership related, if you can work with your company to be a must-have software or must-have product, like something you can't live without, right? Like I can't today live without Zoom. Or video chat. Now Zoom is my preferred method of video chat, but I need something, right? And so how do you become a must-have? And there's no real answer here, but I think that's kind of what's going to fuel this like product-led growth trend and hopefully something that sticks forever.
Yeah. Fantastic. And how would you actually get a company to transform into being a must-have product?
Yeah, I think most of this requires talking to your customers, think about what they're doing, what they're not doing versus what you intended to be done, or your product to be used for. Looking at your competition to see why people love them, why people hate them, what's good, what's bad. I think really comes down to figuring out where do you provide the most value for your customers. I think at first pass through can be done in a kind of quantitative way of like, okay, I do this, that, the other, and are people actually using that, right? So like something like amplitude or some sort of product usage metrics, are people using the features I set out to do? And then the question is, the next question I would ask, and this is more done in a qualitative way, is are the features or things that is your software that, let's just say the customers that do use it regularly, are they getting value? And what is the value they're getting from it, right? So we're a sales tool. So if customers are using Mailshake and they are not generating sales, then ultimately our product is failing. Like it might do the features the right way, but that's not that customer, or our customers are going to churn away if they don't generate sales from them. So our company not only has to build features and functionality to help them generate sales, but so does our content, so does our brand, so does anything else we live, breathe, and do. And so it's just like, again, interviewing customers and really getting down to the bottom of like, are they generating revenue from our software? Because that's what it's intended. And if they're not, what can we do as a company, a brand, a product to be able to help them do that? Again, hard things to do and probably things that will take years to accomplish, but definitely this is a good time to do that, because I guarantee you the answer you'll get will be a very truthful, harsh answer, right? Because people are very cost sensitive and it's just not a good time to be spending money.
Absolutely. And I think right now people are very, very willing to talk to you too.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting. All right. Well, thank you for your insightful feedback. Okay. So Semi, I'd like to move over to you, and I'd love I would like to ask you the 5 best practices you would suggest to sales teams to practice during this pandemic, especially given that sales teams are trickier than ever because of churn and everything going on.
Okay, thank you. Indeed, I mean, churn during normal times and losing clients that you have converted is tough, but churn during these times, it's even tougher because you feel that you didn't do everything you could to save it from not happening. So I'll split the best practices in like 2 categories. The best practices for existing clients and the best practices for new clients. I realize that companies, especially relatively new companies that have just reached their, let's say, their 1 million ARR, it's very easy to forget the existing clients because you've done this first phase relatively successfully. You've reached your goal that was only a few months ago, and you want more. And it's so easy to lose what you've done that it's quite terrifying. So. Number 1, I think it's engagement, and engagement can be different things. It can be a chat, it can be a phone call, it can be an email with a very specific asset that is relevant to that client, but increased engagement. And in this phase, you need more engagement, 100%. The second thing is understanding usage. Like, as it was said earlier, we all design products with a certain intent, and then they're used in a different way, and the value people get is different than the one that you originally thought they would get. And understanding how people use a product and the way they use it, how often they use it, it's super important. And in order to avoid churn, that's, I think, the only way to understand how people use your product, and therefore be in a position to categorize your clients. So number 3 is know your clients. It's not acceptable to get surprised by clients that are lost. So people should, like sales teams, should know when they get a client that is lost. They should expect it in advance, and they should have done all the relevant actions in order to get there. And it's actually very easy to not do it because you are at peace that you have converted them, and then suddenly you get this phone call and 10 interactions, 25 emails, 3 trips to another location, like that disappear because you lost them. Now on new clients, that's tougher with COVID, 100%, because you need to create this first touch. So for us, it's 100% more generating more inbound. Outbound in COVID, we find it tougher. It's tougher to reach people when you don't know them, and people have 100 other more problems these days. They do their own job, they teach their kids' teacher job, their lots of other people's jobs, so they don't want to listen about something new. So generating inbound is always easier to manage, and diverting more budget into digital efforts compared to traveling. That was one of the means that we were getting inbound before, or conferences, events, and things like that. Of course, all these things won't happen anytime soon. So digital marketing and more inbound in order to replace the activities that you don't do. I think these are the main things. The 5th one is, not everybody can do it. Some companies can, and some companies have done it, is to promote features within your product that are there to boost collaboration. As we all worry about how our teams collaborate and are they efficient and productive, I think collaboration has been the biggest worry of most of CEOs, at least for the first month and a half of the pandemic. So if your product does promote collaboration, and a lot of SaaS do that, a way to go about it is to focus more on these features. It's not easy if these are not already within the workflow of the companies, but for sure, I think you will find 20-30% of the features that work better now, and they're more relevant now because people are remote. So I think these are the 5 things that I consider important: engagement, understanding usage, knowing your clients and who is about to drop, promoting collaboration, and generating more inbound through digital marketing compared always to normal times.
Yes, I completely agree. I think that's really interesting. Do you think that sales departments will now be easier and more inclined towards the product-led model in order to become more proactive with their customers?
Yeah, I think they will be more inclined, but it highly depends on the type of product, the phase they are in. It's completely different if you are at your first 20 clients, 30 clients, 200K ARR, and it's completely different if you have reached the 1 million ARR target, let's say. So everybody will try to be more product-led, that's 100%, but if you can be successful, it highly depends on your phase and the type of clients. It's completely different if you try to convert a small SaaS company to buy and try to persuade them to buy your SaaS, or if you try to convert ExxonMobil. It's not the same situation. So while everybody will have the tendency to have smaller sales cycles and more product-led approach, it's not going to be that easy to implement. I think that in Signal we have tried to become more product-led. We would give the keys of the product from day one. We do free trials. Though while we mature, we try to reduce the trial cycle in order to minimize the cost of acquisition. But I think what we will see more is that some SaaS companies will try to promote now more freemium packages or a mix of free and paid packages in order to generate this product-led approach. So I think that's something that we will see happening more and more within the next few months.
Wow, that's interesting. So you have canceled you shortened your trial period. How long do you actually give your signups now?
It used to be 3 months, and that was when we were building our first, let's say, 30 clients, and we wanted to gain confidence that the product works. And now we've reduced it to 1 month, and I find it already long enough. But 1 month is the lowest that we have managed. But our clients are ExxonMobil and this type of people, so it's for them it can last 2 years sometimes. We try to keep it to 1 month.
Awesome. And this actually leads me directly into a question from an attendee, but it's for everyone on the panel. How did PLG get you your first 100 users, and what specific steps did you take early on, and what mistakes did you learn from that? What mistakes did you learn?
I can jump in if you guys don't mind. So Mailshake and grew completely on its own. We didn't spend any money on marketing until about 2 years into the business. 100% product, word of mouth driven, and still word of mouth. I'd still call it product-led growth. It is our biggest channel. And so what we really did was removed the pricing from the friction point, and just got customers using the product. So our core customers is a salesperson. And so we just gave it away for like 95% off. And this was not a sustainable model. This was not the long-term intention. And as a result, we got around 2,000 or 3,000 users on the platform. And we then just fixed the problems. It wasn't perfect. We fixed the problems that they would run into, and we just sat back, and about 10 or 12% of those customers, the user base, spread the word and actually caused more people to purchase the product. And as a result, we now from day one have been measuring customers that come through word of mouth, and then we never really officially invested in like an affiliate channel or whatnot, but we have a list of customers who consistently recommend us new business, and they've helped us drive new feature development, new things that we do. But yeah, it was literally the result of giving this away and removing price from the hurdle that kickstarted Mailshake's growth.
I can also chime in if I'm not taking anybody's spot. For OWIWI, product-led growth mechanisms and sort of its range of different things that you can do. And to sort of double down on Sujan's point as well, is that it really helped to increase the word of mouth from prospective leads that you have trialing your product to A, converting into paying customers, and B, referring the tool to somebody else. What you said at the beginning of your part, in terms of trying to make it from a nice to have to a critical, a must have, is I think the most on point comment I've heard, and it's completely true. And in that regard, PLG really helped us find the pain points and how we can relieve those pain points for our customers in order to make them feel like, if I don't have this, then I can continue doing my job as well as I can. And for us, what that was essentially incorporating as much as possible and to a minimum as possible, and that was partly our mistake, product feedback, onboarding feedback, just general surveys and micro surveys within our platform and our dashboard. Something that I was completely against with from the beginning, because I've always been the kind of person who said, who responds to these kinds of things? I never do it. But people are actually really willing to share feedback. And most of the time, if it's set up properly, it will be constructive and helpful. But getting it down right to sort of what surveys you present is really part science, part art. And there's no sort of silver bullet or a magic formula template that you can follow. You have to experiment. But we found that by incorporating micro surveys throughout the whole customer journey, especially during their onboarding and their free trial, paid tremendous dividends in helping us refine our backlog, which helped us realize that, oh my God, about 70% of all the features that we want to do, that we thought we wanted to do, people don't even want them, and they're not even aware of them. Whereas we had much smaller things, which in some cases would have been like, well, we might have thought about it, but we said, well, why would anyone pay for this? And it turns out that people would pay a lot. It could be a motivating factor in the purchasing decision. So to me, it was sort of incorporating these mechanisms, these micro surveys within the platform and the trial. But along the way, we also realized that we also need to update the whole onboarding process and all the onboarding flow. And by doing that, we essentially guaranteed, as to a certain degree, that we can communicate the value of the platform more effectively, more efficiently, with less touch points from us ourselves. And also the fact that we now have a much more accurate of what we can consider a qualified lead or not, based on different checklists that we have. That's really sort of supported our sales efforts as well in creating like-minded target groups that we can then go on an outbound strategy with.
And just to add on a little bit on that, so we've also found that PLG is incredibly effective in an expansion strategy at large enterprises. So we primarily target product groups, right, at like the IBMs and Microsoft of the world. And it's easier for us, once we've an existing relationship within IBM, for example, to add on 5 or 6 more product groups at IBM rather than try to find 6 Dropbox size opportunities. And that's purely on a PLG referral kind of mechanism. And I definitely echo everything else that Sujan and Ilias said.
Yeah, I want to change my answer to what Ilias said. That's amazing, microforms. I'm gonna definitely follow up with you on that.
Awesome. The whole point is to share ideas, but honestly, I don't know if I'm, again, hijacking the time, but it's incredible. The amount of feedback that we got and the diversity of the feedback is incredible. And I mean, obviously there's some things that we're still trying to figure out, like being a two-sided platform. In our case, we have, let's call it the B2C segment, what we call it internally, which is basically just could be millennials, job seekers, people interested in personal development who just come across our website and check it out and say, okay, this is pretty cool. And then we have the B2B side, which is companies essentially paying for access to our dashboard to then have more in-depth reports to those same candidates that they assessed. And, it's interesting to see because, like, for example, in terms of, how likely are you to refer this product or a solution to a friend on the B2C side, while even though some people, will rate like very average or slightly above average scores in terms of how they found the experience overall, there's a tremendously high proportion of those people who would like recommend it highly, like 9+ on average. So it's like interesting to try and also dive into the psychology of the consumer, and to also see, for example, what they might want that you might be severely attached to. I can think of one specific example where, you know, we have like voiceover narrations, like saying the story to you. I personally find them a little bit annoying, but I thought it would add to the immersiveness factor of our product. So we ran a poll and we said, you know, how many of you actually like it or find it helpful? An overwhelming majority, about 70% of them said, like, I hated it, I didn't want it. And I never felt more relieved, because it's like, first of all, I kind of validated my own gut instinct, but it also will tremendously reduce my costs moving forward, because I no longer have to do that. And imagine that I have to localize it every time in different languages anytime I want to enter a new market. So there's a lot of great things that can come out of this.
I just wanted to quickly add something. To me, I mean, it's really important to monitor those customers who are really happy, and in that case, or that, and work together with them on your, obviously on your roadmap, involve them from the very beginning and nurture them, because your first 10 happy customers will be the customers that then you can involve in ambassador programs, maybe go to like events together, or invest in product development in terms of like interviews and stuff like that. And at the same time, these are the people who can also maybe mention you in articles or reports, or you can talk about your product. Or look, for example, my case, I recently switched from a company to another company. The first thing I did is I imported basically my entire software stack. So basically, and that's part of the customer success program. Why? Because I was happy with the products I was using previously, because I set up my own world, and I had direct ROI, and I participated, and I was involved in strategic decisions with a roadmap from the beginning with a lot of these companies, and I felt part of their own growth, and I felt part of the product development. So yeah, definitely I felt compelled to continue the journey and import the whole stack. So it's basically a new customer by treating your old customer very well, even though it's the same person, right? So customer referral programs, but also customer ambassador programs, and involving people like constantly in your decision making, in your journey, basically.
Awesome. And James, I know that Respondent is really heavily into evangelizing remote practices for your customers that are especially within the enterprise sector. What are some opportunities and challenges that you and your team have seen when taking over their practices and making them become a remote first culture?
Yeah, so we're an entirely remote company. So we are about 25 people, similar to a lot of the other people on the panel. And we've always been remote. And what we found, particularly in the first couple of weeks of the shutdowns that hit the US, kind of mid-March to early April, was that there was quite a bit of, there was a massive decline in activity on our platform. But that very rapidly picked back up again. And when we started calling clients, and we just started calling clients constantly in those few weeks, right? Because, you know, one of the best things I've read as part of COVID is maybe you had product market fit, but did you have COVID market fit? And so you actually have to restart, call all your clients, see like, do you actually have a use case that's still valuable? And what we found was that a lot of people were just readapting to a new productivity environment, right? A couple of people, I think it might have been in a previous conversation, talked about collaboration. Sammy, I think you talked about collaboration as like this massive fear that managers have. And so we talk a lot to our clients about, you know, oh, did you know this tool allowed you to collaborate? Do you know that you can see your colleagues' work this way? And so that was very, very helpful. The other element was, so we're a research platform where you can recruit and schedule market research and product research participants. And so we were about 75% remote interviews at the time, and we took away the 25% in-person option. And so there was definitely some types of companies that are doing, you know, shampoo studies, right? They have to adapt and, you know, send a bottle of shampoo rather than have them come into the lab up in Cincinnati or whatever it is. And so it generally made the length of time it takes to engage with our product lengthen in some ways. But in general, you know, we were put a lot of content out there. We really try to engage and, again, try to be a leader, I suppose, in the remote kind of culture and the remote workforce. And again, there's some really strong people in the company who have a lot of experience in that, and we're able to really speak to that to a lot of our clients. You're muted, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just realized that. Awesome. And then being a champion of growth with PLG trends, do you think that PLG is going to dominate the industry only during the pandemic, or do you think it will continue afterwards as well?
Yeah, so I mean, so the context of us and PLG. So we only started adopting PLG last November. So we were very much a salesperson-driven kind of culture, but we found that we were getting enough referrals through the product that PLG made more sense to us. So we started the trends we finished it last February, and the numbers were looking pretty good, but then things obviously slowed down a little bit with what COVID has happened. I really think of PLG as like a particular approach that's really good for most companies at a lot of stages in the life cycle of the company, but not for all, right? Like even Slack has salespeople now, right? Like you get to a certain point, and it might make sense to bring back in your sales team, et cetera. And so to me, PLG and how it interacts with the kind of COVID environment, it allows more trying. Like the things that, like the clients that we have that are performing best are the fastest, right? Speed has become like this really important thing. I think, Andy, you mentioned that there's like more of a reticence of trying things. We're seeing that in like the clients who are canceling kind of projects, but the clients who are actually like spending more, and like these are the biggest, the IBMs and Microsofts, they're spending more than ever because they care about competitive research. They want to find out what's happening. And their speed and like getting through procurement is actually much faster for those clients. And so PLG for the clients that are growing, I think will be an even better option. But for clients that are shrinking, yes, they're going to be canceling, and maybe the approach of growth in that org is like, it doesn't matter really if it's sales or PLG, because they're not going to buy anything at the moment anyways. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. All right, thank you guys. We do have another question from an attendee, Joshua. He is asking, what do you think, how much of a difference there is between B2B and B2C, or is it just person to person?
Hard to, I'd say there's a lot and there's a little. It just depends on kind of like B2B enterprise, versus a gym membership, right? Or like a technology enabled Peloton. So it kind of depends on the industry and size, but there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences, because ultimately, even though you're selling to somebody, you're still selling to a person. The buying power is very different, right? But then in situations like COVID, regardless of buying power, people are buying $2,500, $3,000 gym equipment for their homes with like $40 to $80 a month subscription. So like that logic goes out the door with that category. Hard to say.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, speaking from personal experience, and I'm obviously biased for my own experiences with OWIWI, because we address two very completely different and conflicting audiences. So like you have job seekers, so millennials, Generation Z, with all the good things that come with them in terms of characteristics and demographics. And then you have HR managers, enterprise type clients, the recruiters, the employers. And these two things are completely different. So it's always a challenge. I mean, we see it in terms of marketing communications, like, are we crossing the line here? Potentially sort of quote unquote slandering the job seekers, or are we throwing shade at the recruiters? And, you just end up saying like, you know what, I'm just going to play it safe and try and share some, generic content in that way. But at the end of the day, it really depends on your target segment and your product. There's unfortunately no sort of generic answer to that. You have to really sort of take a deep dive into your customers and figure out whether there is anything that overlaps them and connects them, what separates them, and whether one of those characteristics might define how you proceed further down the line. Because by choosing one over the other, you might completely disqualify the other group. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's not that it's not possible, But to me, with regards to PLG, I see it much more as a B2B tool without saying that exclusively relative to OWIWI, because I think that you can achieve the same results through other means, much more minimal means for B2C. But that's just my 2 cents.
If I can add, I think it's very risky if SaaS companies starts getting confused between am I selling a B2B or a B2C product, and I think a lot of people do it, and it's very easy to do it because at a certain point of your journey you realize that the B2B is small, B2C is bigger. Part of my product could be relevant for a lot more people, and we've done that as well in Signal, and it's very easy to lose focus and suddenly to start treating your product like 2 different things, your audience is like 2 different things. So one thing that I've learned is that especially at the beginning, you should have like 1 product, 1 type of clients, 1 million ARR. And then after that, maybe you can pivot, but it's getting confused is the worst thing that can happen.
If I may add also something like the whole subscription-based economy also changed a little bit the perspective in terms of B2B, B2C. As we don't deal with customers or users anymore, we have subscribers. And the difference is a customer is somebody who gets into your store, or if you're a brick and mortar store, buys something once and they leave, or like in the past, a company that would purchase licenses for software like Oracle or SAP and disappear. And now we have subscribers, so we have this long-term relationship, and it doesn't really matter if we sell medical devices, insurance, software, or a car. We continuously like look at Tesla, right? So you park your car at nighttime, wake up in the morning, and it's you wake up and you have new services. It's a whole new car. It updates overnight, right? And the same happens with software that improves over time, or services like we were talking about subscription models also for gym equipment or shaving or like grooming things. Like everything is now this kind of continuous relationship. So it's a lot more human to human because the subscriber is at the center of our activities, and every company is basically a service company, no matter what. I recently talked to the heads of sales at a company. They sell medical devices to huge hospitals, stuff like that. But they actually turned into a software company overnight because they had to, like, the device is only the embodiment of a service, but their relationship with the customer was more direct and based on the fact that they had a continuous relationship with supporting services and strategy and so on and so on. So yeah, like this kind of subscription-based economy is changing a lot the way we look at B2B and B2C. It's more like business to subscriber, and it's a long-lasting relationship no matter what.
And just to add on to that, so I think that subscriber kind of model, like the focus on an individual in enterprise software, that's becoming on for years, right? Consumerization of IT, and that'll continue. But the idea that a very large enterprise, even an enterprise company like Zoom or Slack, like are B2C focused. I mean, look at where the revenue comes from. Like these are B2B platforms that a lot of B2C people, a lot of consumers have adapted for use cases. But like it would be a mistake in my view for Zoom and Slack to start adding all these cool things for a consumer audience when 90% of their revenue comes from large enterprises, or that's where they're going. Maybe they want to spin it off and be a consumer product as well, but like I think trying to service two masters like that can be a mistake.
Okay, fantastic. So I believe this is going to be one of my last questions for you, but how can companies actually invest more into the product-led growth model now that resources are very limited and many products are going to be needing to invest more into the product teams and development teams?
If I may, and again, speaking from experience, because to me, as far as Ilias is concerned, I hadn't really officially heard the term PLG up until the beginning of the year. I was reading up about it, but I had never really connected the dots. And having a small development team, and in terms of programmers. Obviously, we have to really be careful about what we prioritize and what we choose to do. Obviously, we have a preference, thinking, call it arrogance, whatever you want to call it, that we can do it better if we do it in-house. But sometimes that's just not possible because you've got other deliverables that you need to sort of deliver on. I found that there are a lot of interesting tools out there that are really cost-effective that can help you sort of get a better idea of whether or not this is worth investing in. And while it might be a bit of an overhead to say that, you know what, this wasn't projected, but, you know, do I want to spend a month and a half of developing this and then not knowing whether it's going to work? It's just not worth it. So I'd much rather put up a sort of slightly large overhead in front of me for like a month or two, just to also gather enough data to then say empirically that, yes, I got valuable inputs or feedback from that. And then if you like the value that you got from it, then go ahead and deploy it in-house and, you know, whatever that may take you. But, you know, you have to approach it with a lean perspective. Obviously, not just like throw out anything out there. It does require some planning and there are some intricacies. But in general terms, I think that there's a lot of tools out there that can really help you validate and substantiate whether or not you need to go through with this investment. Call it PLGization of your product.
Yeah, I think echoing what you said is that you're front loading the workload, but you're saving ultimately time, right? So as a software founder, my most expensive resources or my development team, but not just the people, but where we have finite amount of hours or dev cycles that we can do. And so if I have to do more work on the front end, let's say 100x the work, but I only work on 2 or 3 of the right things that the customer really wants, ultimately it's a win-win scenario for the customer and my business, because I only build what's right, and not to mention like the consequences of building the wrong things too, right? Like there's a negative impact from doing stuff that people don't want.
Wonderful. All right, so I think we can wrap up this session. It was really, really insightful. Thank you guys so much for your time and all of your really amazing words that you shared with us. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
You guys.
Take care.
Take care.
All right, so we are going to be hopping into our third session with Ashvin, who is the Chief Customer Officer at Gainsight. For those who don't know, Gainsight is also now a partner of the Product-Led Growth Hub, and we are going to be offering 4 free sessions to everyone that is registered to the PLG Hub Academy. Those are going to be Gainsight sessions. They include creating the ultimate PLG strategy, a product-led growth for B2B, tech touch onboarding, and how to drive sustainable adoption. So thank you guys for that. And they're going to be presented by all the leaders at Gainsight. And this will help ensure that you can learn from the best. So as I mentioned, our third session is an AMA with Ashvin, who's the Chief Customer Officer at Gainsight. And he's going to be sitting down with Despina, the founder of the PLG Hub, to discuss how organizations can fight churn and do more with less during this COVID crisis. Thank you guys so much for this.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Anne. Ashvin, welcome. It's a great honor to have you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, excited about this.
Okay, I think it's time we take over. Ashvin, for starters, I think that all the audience of ours crave to ask you many questions. We had many questions until we get there. We had a lot of feedback. And I think the first is that we would like to hear more about you and where you come from and your role and how diverse it might be, especially in those times.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So quick background. So I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Gainsight. What that means for us is once a prospect becomes a customer, all the functions that work with our customers, that could be professional services, technical support, renewals, customer success management, operations, all of that stuff is all part of my charter. I've been at Gainsight now for 5 years, live in San Francisco with my wife and my 5-year-old, who is easily my toughest customer that I work with. And then prior to Gainsight was at McKinsey & Company, the consulting firm, for a few years. And then prior to that, several other marketing and sales roles. So generally I've been in customer-facing roles and some version of customer experience or marketing and sales. And so that's the general common thread. I also have the attention span of a mosquito, so I want to do new things every few weeks, years, months. And so like I've done a few different industries in banking, publishing, etc. And now at Gainsight, and excited about it.
It sounds like an exciting journey indeed, to be honest. I think that not a lot of people can take credit for such an experience, and we can move forward. And actually, I will go direct to the point and ask how customer success is now different in regards to what it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago. All the planet is in heavy recession right now. I mean, we don't really know when that will end. We pivot. I think we pivot per industry, we pivot per country. I mean, people really don't know how to react. And, prior to me inviting you, I asked the community many times, what would you like to learn from us? And the number one word was always churn. Obviously, it's not only a buzzword or a difficult word to pronounce and say, but it's also a pain point that nobody really knows how to manage right now. So any insight you can share with us, I'm sure they would be more than grateful.
Yeah, so specifically, like, what does CS mean in this post-COVID world? What customer success means? Is that the question, Despina?
Yes, how customer success has changed now that pretty much there is no standard in the industry, in any industry, in any country. Yeah. Not any country is stabilized, to put it that way.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, like, I think our CEO, Nick, summarized it well when he sent out this tweet that basically said, every CEO and CFO right now have a spreadsheet open of all the software spend that they have across the company. And then there is a line, and then you either as a software vendor are above that line and you stay because of adoption, experience, outcomes, etc., or you're below the line and you get chopped. Right? Like, that's the reality today. Every decision is being made by CFOs and CEOs, regardless of who you are selling into in most companies. And in this market, basically during this downturn or during this COVID crisis, new sales for most companies, there are some companies that are doing well even on the new sales front, but most companies are seeing decline in new sales or new logos, as they talk about it, because your buyers are slowing down on new decisions. Your existing customers, however, are scrutinizing what outcomes and experiences they've got from you as a vendor. Your existing customers are noticing who is there for them, who is going out of their way to help them in these times, etc. And your existing customers also need your help in these times because they are busy trying to save their own customers. And so anything that your software can do for them, anything that you can do for them and their teams in these times of crisis goes a long way. And your existing customers are also looking to consolidate their tech stack or their existing spend. If your software can do what some other softwares can do, in addition to what you do as your core competency, then your customers will want to try to consolidate, spend wherever possible. All that to say, if new business is slowing down and your customers need more help from you, you have your customer success teams and your customer success motions, whether that is a separate team or not, have a lot more role to play in today's times than they've ever been, right? So you want to retain as many customers as possible in this market, because that'll actually determine who stays in the longer run as a viable business and who continues to become extinct in that sense. And so CS is super important. At the same time, your CFOs or most CFOs are not letting you hire tons of people even for your CS motions, right? So you're kind of doing that balance of CS is most important. However, I'm not getting any more headcount or spend to put towards CS. So like the thing to solve for or to optimize for in this situation is how can you keep as much retention as possible while doing more with less, as was introduced at the beginning of this cycle. So how can you become more efficient? How can you stop doing certain things that were low value? How can you increase things that were high value? Many companies are also starting to think about bringing other teams. So for example, if new business is slowing down, your sales reps probably have more time that they could be spending with customers. So many companies like Dell Boomi, we are trying to do that internally at Gainsight as well, where your account executives or sales reps almost double down as customer success managers during this crisis. So you have more CSMs in the company, basically.
That is actually very flexible, to be honest, especially for such a large organization as Gainsight is, and with the customers you have. I mean, you have heavy enterprise, so this is not easy. I was wondering, I guess that now it's the time where customer success should be more empathetic than ever. I mean, it always has to be, but now even more. I was wondering, besides always being there, besides, trying to understand beforehand what's going to happen, how you can actually be proactive. I will insert some PLG elements here. Obviously, PLG relies on data. Customer success now needs to be heavy into data, customer data, and product data to be able to acknowledge what is going on. So being a company that is into product-led growth, what would you advise on customer success managers to become more proactive and actually, be there before the customers actually need them? Because I understand that being there and discussing things is one thing, but customers may have other concerns, for example, packaging, which is not actually customer success per se, but it's part of customer success to actually reassure the customer that we're here for you to do something better.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's a great question. Firstly, again, like tying it back to doing more with less, you don't have the capacity in your company to spread everyone across all customers. So step one is take a relook at your segmentation or categorization of customers. Like a simple thing that we recommend is bucket your customers into category 1, 2, and 3. Category 1 are your customers or verticals that are very severely negatively impacted during this crisis. And so it could be travel, it could be hospitality, it could be in-person retail, etc. Like those are typical industries that are getting pretty brutally impacted during this crisis. Other end of that spectrum is category 3. Those companies are doing exceptionally well. So those could be like the collaboration tools like Slack or Zoom, etc. And like security companies, because everyone is online right now. Like all of those industries are doing exceptionally well. And then you have the messy middle, which is category 2. The point there is for category 1, they may churn regardless of what you do. So even if you were proactive, there is very little that you might be able to do in those segments. So how can you take more of a digital first approach in those segments? Interact with, like, don't have your human beings, your CSMs or sales reps in category 1 customers, like only use either email automation or in-product engagement, in-product feedback to talk to them. And if they want to continue conversations, then you bring a human being into that conversation. Category 3, the companies that are doing really well and verticals that are doing well, it's less about a retention play. It's more of how can you collaborate with the sales team, with the product team within your company to drive expansion, right? So in those companies, let's start looking at which customers use your product data and product-led growth to then say, of the category 3 companies that are doing well, which ones are actually finding a lot of adoption of your product? those are then the first people that you would go to and say, you're already getting value from my product. I would like to talk about like where else can we consolidate spend for you? What else can we do with you? Your other BU doesn't seem to be using Gainsight or your software, and hence like you should be starting to do that. For category 3 companies that are not adopting your product well, again coming from the product-led growth data, you can then say, can we invest professional services? Can we invest some technical resources to quickly get the customer to adopt the product some more in the next 2 months, so that they can then become part of the expansion conversation, etc., that we have, because those companies are doing well. And so how can you invest the limited resources that you have to drive more expansion and drive more adoption within that space? Category 2, which is the messy middle, they're kind of doing okay. They're not doing great, but they're not doing too poorly either. Go to them and again, look at who's adopting your product, who has given really high net promoter scores, whether that's in app or by email, and then have those conversations for early renewals and early proactive renewals with those types of customers. And for the ones that are not getting value from you, drive the motions to actually get them to adopt. An example that we are doing internally, looking at that type of product data, is running hands-on webinars. So every other week, we are basically creating webinars for customers that are not adopting certain features. We'll invite those customers only to that particular webinar and show them live in the webinar how to use that part of the product better. And then we'll follow up with in-product surveys, in-product prompts to make sure that that customer is using that feature better than they did prior to that webinar. So those are ways that we collaborate with our product team, take the data, and then do different actions depending on whether the customer is adopting or not. Does that make sense, Despina?
Totally. I would say that you actually, I had 2 questions when you began, and now I have none because you answered before I even had the time to make it. So yes, it makes sense. My next question is, okay, everybody is remote now. Everybody have tools to collaborate. This is a transformation as well, because especially for enterprise, for example, this was not the case. They have like thousands of employees. Some other companies, they collaborate remotely, but they had some people laid off. So
right.
You, on the one hand, you have the remote first transformation. On the other hand, you have this transformation and perhaps less employees that deal with more tasks, again remotely, again being in a different mode, which, like it or not, you cannot get into day one. So I guess that from your experience, I would like to learn if you have anything to suggest or anything perhaps that customer success can do to help those organizations that have fewer people and have yet to actually give, again, the best results they can possibly do.
Yeah, totally. I think part of this is customer success needs to come back and tell the organization, whether it's the product team, engineering team, or other parts of the organization. Customer success can help in at least 2 ways. The first one is, you still have several customers of yours that are doing really well and finding tons of value in your product and service. I think customer success teams can take that message to the rest of the organization. Otherwise, it feels like doom and gloom all the time, and everyone needs positive stories to come out of this. And so CSMs and CS teams should bring those positive stories to say, in these times, look at how our product is helping customers actually serve their customers in a much better way, right? So bring those positive stories, share that positive feedback with everyone in your company. I think that is a big part of what CS teams should do to keep the spirit up. And then the other thing that CS teams can do a lot more of is collaborating with the product team. So product has like a roadmap and they have tons of things to do. In these times, there might be certain things that CS teams are seeing firsthand in the field that they want to bring back to the product teams and make sure that those get prioritized in the roadmap. In like anything that helps remote workforce, anything that helps doing more with less, All of these types of things are feedback that the CS team can see firsthand with their customers, and they should bring that back to the product team on a regular basis. Even setting up like bi-weekly check-ins with the product team to say, here are our new learnings, if that helps you prioritize and feed into the product roadmap. So those are two very specific things that I can call out. In addition, obviously, teammates are going through a tough time. Like some people who never worked from home are now working from home. You have kids at home or family members at home, and you're trying to juggle work-life balance in the best possible way in these times, and productivity is a big challenge. So like one thing that we're doing, this is not CS team specific, but one thing we're doing at Gateside is starting every morning with 15 minutes of something fun across the whole company. It's not mandatory. If you feel like joining, you join. If you don't want to do it, you don't do it. And it could be as simple as bringing your pets on the call, or bringing your kids on the Zoom call, right? Like it's things that we're doing to just make sure that people are feeling supported, feeling heard, and bring a positive cheer to your daily life. So those are things that everyone should be trying to do.
I would like to take a step back. We have a question from an attendee. Says that if high-value customers are not engaging on these hands-on webinars that you deliver, what do you suggest? Anything that you have tried or heard that might work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think typically the root cause, if you think about the why behind that question, why any customer wouldn't engage on a product that they're already paying for, right? It's either because, one, you are single-threaded, you're not talking to the right people, meaning you're only talking to someone who actually doesn't care about what you're trying to do with the product, etc. There might be others in the company that you haven't spoken to who might have an input into that process. So make sure that you're talking to multiple stakeholders within the company. It could be a buyer, it could be the CIO, it could be the CFO, it could be end users, etc. So do that, and like I can guarantee that at least someone amongst those multiple stakeholders will want to engage because your message will resonate with them. The second thing I'll call out is at this point, the big things on everyone's mind is how can I do more with less, regardless of the industry? How can I do more with less? How can I make sure that my teammates feel supported? How can I make sure that we retain as many customers as possible? How can I help my sales teams with expansion? Right? Like these are four big things that are on everyone's mind. So if your messaging, if you can tailor your product's message to get to one of these four things, then the chances are that your customers will respond to you and talk to you. So that's maybe a second thing that I've seen. And then the third thing that I've seen is like proactively offering something that is a give to your customers. If you notice, many companies are coming out with offers that say unlimited access to the platform for the next 6 months, or like new processes, like services for free for the next 6 months to build these 2 or 3 things. Like something that gives you a hook into that customer to then say, like, we want to offer this to you so that you can get more value out of our product or service, which then, like most people, if that is a meaningful offer, will want to engage as part of the subsequent discussion. So try something like that proactively, because many companies are doing that.
Okay, I have a very interesting one. I have an attendee saying that, where do you see the future of customer success, and will there be any lasting impact from COVID?
It's a very good question. I think, like, again, this is completely depends on your industry, completely depends on your product, etc. But in general, this is customer success, not just the team, but like customer success within your companies. This is the moment to shine for several of those teams. So this is a make or break time when CFOs will go in and say, we expected retention to drop 5 points, but because we have a CS team, we only dropped 2 points, or we actually held flat. And so the value of the CS team will become even more apparent in a lot of companies in these times, which then makes for next year's budget conversations and next year, like the future of CS within your companies, that much more strategic, that much more important. And so that is part one. Part two is also, this is such a forcing function for most CS organizations. Again, like most CS organizations do certain things mostly because of inertia, mostly because they used to do things the same way in the past and no one has bothered changing it. This COVID crisis has now forced all of us to reevaluate which activities are most important, which activities should we do more of, which activities should we stop doing. And it's always tough to take a step back and make those conversations happen. But this, because you're trying to do more with less, right now is the best time to do something like this. And then I'll say for companies that are still hiring, they will look to not like hire outside of the usual tech pockets, if you will, like the Bay Area and the coasts, or like certain big cities in the country. People will start saying, if folks are going to work remote for the foreseeable future, they can be in any part of the world, and hence we can hire cost optimized skill set across the world that makes sense to us. And so that potentially could change the way we operate in the customer success world, and where we hire, what types of skills we hire for, etc. Become something that has a lasting impact.
Thank you so much, Asvin. Okay, my opinion actually before moving forward is that sales and customer success will indeed become something like one, the extension of the other, because now the lines are a bit blurred of where is new business and where is expansion and where is retention. So there is a chance that customer success may pass some trends to sales to actually pursue customers that have specific trends, industries that have specific trends, and just the rest on someone else, because their churn, for example, is something that will sustain across the next months or something. Okay, I have another one.
Maybe one thing to add, Despina, to that point around sales and CS being extensions and that collaboration becoming even more stickier. Sorry to interrupt you, but one more thing to add is I'm seeing this across several companies. We are doing this at Gainsight as well. But this notion of pod structure. So many companies are experimenting with this idea that for your highest growth accounts or highest expansion customers, create pods of sales rep, CSM, maybe a sales engineer, product liaison from the product manager, from the product team, etc., and maybe professional services if you have that. But these groups of people work on a common set of customers. And for that common set of customers, each one gets compensated on the expansion within those customers, the gross retention, or how much dollars you save within those customers if they have renewals coming up. And so those people get to know each other really well. They develop the muscle to work with each other on a common set of customers. And so people are experimenting with that type of a model to foster better collaboration between sales and CS. So something for all of you to consider in your companies as well.
Yes, I guess it's another way to bring down silos even more and find new codes of collaboration in times that nobody has seen coming. So yes, I would agree 1000% on that. So yeah. I have another question which says that how can customer success and product leaders support their teams during this difficult situation? You have partially answered that before, but I guess now product teams are even more forced to deliver a stunning product experience, because even now, even more, and also develop products that may resonate better, new products, that is, or I don't really know, that would resonate better with existing needs. I mean, we've all seen how much remote working has increased and remote tools, the growth they have. But even if you have an existing tool that you use for years, you now are more demanding as a customer because every penny literally matters. So I guess as much pressure there is on customer success, there is also on product. What to deliver, when to deliver, the least minimum bugs ever, for example, or I don't know, something that resonates best with customer feedback, but also with product vision. So I would like your feedback on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I'll give you a very tactical thing that we started doing because of this whole COVID crisis, which many companies don't do. So product typically builds products so that we can sell more, right? Like it can be mostly with the focus of sales in mind, not the install base or customers in mind. That's like in most organizations, that's generally product's key purview. And so product teams and sales teams typically have some version of collaborating with each other, standing meetings, etc. I think what needs to happen, which we started executing on like 3 months back, is product and CS leaders need to have those same type of forums where CS is talking about like big things that are needed from product for saving customers or for retention management or expansion within the existing install base, etc. Those, like, it's almost like product also shifting their focus from purely new business to a combination of new business and customers. Not to say that product was not focused on existing customers, but it was always a secondary thought. I think saving customers and retention has become so much more important now that product and CS leaders need a much more, way higher collaboration than they've ever done. So we've set up, my chief product officer and I have a standing meeting every other week on all the top things that we need to do on retention. And then there are actions that come out of that meeting for both of us, and we take it back to our team. So that's a very tactical example for how product and CS need to collaborate that much more. I'll also call out something that we do internally at Gainsight, which is a pretty high value process, which is what we call as a product risk process. So customers typically have like tons of enhancement requests that they have from you as a software vendor, new things that they want, new buttons that they want added. It could be like the gamut of what customers want from your product. We have the CS team prioritize the top 5% or so cases. You may have 100 things, but the top 5 that actually have a huge impact on adoption, retention, expansion within the customer base. And those get flagged to the product management team, and they make it to the top of the product roadmap funnel. So the rest of the roadmap can continue as planned, but there is some capacity allocated to the product risks, which then get bubbled up to the top and then get fixed or get enhanced much faster than they would have otherwise done. So that process is, we run the whole thing out of Gainsight and have the product team collaborate with the CS team using Gainsight. That's proven to be an incredible value add for us and our customers going through that process.
Okay, before I move on to the next question, I need to say that I would die to see your product roadmap. I mean, so many requests from so many different products. It would be a thrill for me. And honestly, a challenge. I mean, you have such an amazing product. I mean, okay, Gainsight PX is obviously one of my favorites one. I would die to see the development, the whole mindset before. I close the parenthesis as a PLG geek and I move forward, and I will bring Pulse into the discussion. You hold an amazing event last week. We couldn't get enough out of it. And I'm sure that you got a lot of feedback both for product people and from customer success people. So I will extend my previous question, and I would like your insights on which were the 3, 4, 2 top trends that product management leaders and customer success leaders actually seem to care about? What they shared with you? I mean, what the engagement? So what were the high level trends that so much engagement on customer success and product experience turned out to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the big trends from, in general, the notion was for CS and product teams, customer success and product teams to talk about things that they're doing in their own functions or silos, but then also things that they pass on to each other, right? So we spoke about both, and several companies and customers spoke about both of those pieces. The ones that big takeaways for me from my standpoint was, the first one was this notion of end-to-end customer experience. So customers or buyers typically interact with you in the pre-sales cycle. They tell you things that are important for them to solve in your product, and there is a certain priority list for them to solve for, which then once they become a customer and they move on, it seems to get lost. And then the success plan or the outcomes that the customer wants from you, someone from your services team or your CSM will go in and ask those same questions all over again. So companies like Splunk, what they're doing is doing an end-to-end customer journey. They're saying in the pre-sales cycle, your SCs or your account executives capture what value your outcomes or business value your customers want from you. Those are captured in a system, which then directly translates into, for example, in Gainsight success plans that the professional services teams and the CSMs and the renewals reps can then focus on to deliver value. Now, that works for your high-touch customers, but once you go into your long-tail or SMB type customers where you don't have you may not have a CSM, you may not have an account manager, right? In those cases, everything that is captured in the sales cycle can be served up in the product itself, in-app, as part of the product-led growth strategy, to then say, you said this was your priority. We are 3 months in. We needed you to have taken these training courses, but you've not taken them. Or you've taken these training courses, but here are 2 other things that companies like you should be doing. It's all engagement within the app, within the product, as well as for CSM-led customers. It's all done out of a success plan or account plan. So that end-to-end journey is something that Splunk has done a really good job of. There are several other companies that are also doing a great job of. That, I think, is the direction that a lot of companies will go with the end-to-end process. So brings CS teams, brings sales teams, brings product teams, everyone to deliver customer success, which is awesome to watch. So that I thought was a stellar showcase. The other stellar showcase that I saw was increasingly, so the head of product and adoption at Adobe, as well as the head of product and adoption and operations at Seismic, they both presented on this notion. One, I think their titles itself are now being called not just product management, but product management, adoption, and customer success. That's the exact title of the person from Adobe who leads those teams. And so many product managers are now thinking about feature adoption, process adoption as part of their charter, not just rolling out new products. Right, so that is coming as a big change across many companies, and the way Seismic and Adobe are making that happen is a lot of in-product messaging, a lot of changes to the product itself based on tracking usage analytics to say most people click on button X, then button Y, and then button Z. Can we combine all of them and make the whole process streamlined? So using analytics data, using usage data to then make better decisions on product design itself. Beyond product design, they are collaborating much better with the CSM teams to then say, we invested a ton of R&D into this new feature. We are rolling a beta program out, or we are rolling a new process out, a new feature out. We would like to collaborate and then take both product teams and CS teams take the same North Star metric to say adoption of feature X improves by 20% within the next 3 months. They both take the common goal and then they go and deliver on it. So these are ways that leading edge companies like Adobe, Seismic, and a few others are combining forces to actually deliver on it. So that was a big takeaway for me on that second one. Yeah, Despina, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, you mentioned North Star metric, and it's very interesting. Do you think that this North Star metric will now perhaps change? I mean, okay, obviously adoption or product experience, or I don't really know the deliverables each solution has, is a standard North Star metric. But right now we have so many factors here on the table: pricing, packaging, remote working. Companies lay off people. They hardly think what we'll do the next month. I mean, until this storm pass over. So my question is, do you think that North Star metric is actually, being iterated now, or do we add new KPIs on the existing North Star metrics at any point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, people are starting to think about it. It's a question of how much do those North Star metrics change in your business because of these changes, right? An example is you might have been okay with a monthly active user type metric. I'm making that up as an adoption metric. But because everyone is remote, everyone has more time to spend on your product or services, or you've launched a new feature that actually enables people to do more things with your product, you may choose to make that a more frequent metric instead of a monthly. You could choose to then say, now there is more value to actually start tracking weekly active users or daily active users. So you may move to a much higher value or a higher frequency metric as an example. The second, I mean, like the first, call it stage in the maturity, is product and CS taking a common North Star metric as their metric. That doesn't happen in most companies. Product has a completely different set of metrics. CS has a completely different set of metrics. So even agreeing on what these are is a step one. Step two is then, like, as I said, can you optimize those metrics to be more in line with where you are today and the environment around us with COVID and everything else? So that's number two. And then step three is, can we go beyond adoption metrics to like either process metrics or value metrics? So an example is just logging in and active usage is not sufficient for long-term value. It's logging in and doing the right things that are important to deliver value. That is, like, it could be you need to go from page 1 to page 2 to feature 1 to feature 2, and you've mapped out that entire process flow. And then you start tracking what percentage of your users actually follow that process flow. That is a much higher value metric than just login metrics, right? And then because people follow that workflow, does that mean your product helps your customers save costs or save time or add to the top line, etc., is the next level metric that people should be starting to track. But it's not you have to go through the process and you can't jump from one to the other. But I think the next step is starting to think about higher value North Star metrics than just adoption metrics.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think it's the time to talk about the elephant in the room. And this is obviously packaging. And I will say that as a SaaS person, I've noticed how many offers, how many extended trials are in place. And honestly, this is the hardest part for any organization in order to, stop churn from prolonging or stop new business from coming forward. But I'm not an expert in finance. I never liked numbers that much in that order. I like product data. There we can talk. When do you think that enough offers are enough, or where do you think that how can people actually monitor that and streamline that and find a middle ground? Because like it or not, we all worked at the end of the day to actually sustain our organization, to make money, to grow. Now growth is a bit out of the picture. We're looking forward to retention just to stay on the same day we were yesterday. So what would you advise there?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I'm not an expert in offer creation or offer management, but like a few things just from experience that I'll call out is companies are expecting not just your product to be simpler, but also your offers to be simpler. And so like the general trend that customers are expecting is for much simpler packaging and much simpler offer management, not too many choices. Don't let people like cherry pick one additional feature, etc. Like it's as simple as possible, as comprehensive as possible. The second thing that I often see is companies add things to their offer management list, but then they're actually like they add more things on a frequent basis, but they don't go back and remove things from the offer management space, right? So just like you would about product adoption, I think it's equally important to then go back and say, we had an offer in place. What percentage of customers actually bought that? And then what percentage of those actually renewed those add-ons that we'd instituted? And maybe the realization is those never stuck, and those should be the ones that you get rid of or include as part of your core offering or your core platform. So just like you use usage data and data to drive product decisions, also use data to drive better offering decisions. And your frontline sales reps, CSMs, should be the first ones to come back to you and say, this is working, this is not working because of whatever reasons, right? Like, so that's the second thing that I'll call out. And then the third thing that I'll call out is, again, like tailor your messaging. I think you called this out, but extended trials. Right now, anything that you could be doing to either cut costs from a technology stack standpoint, or like have better exposure throughout your customer base, and not just to one team within your customer base. If you can expand your scope beyond, the chances are that you'll be more successful in the longer run. So anything that you could be doing from a packaging offering standpoint to drive trials that either save costs or give you more strategic visibility across the organization, I would strongly urge that those are two principles to use when you're thinking about new offers to launch.
Okay, and I will move forward with the last question, which is, what do you think are the best practices SaaS industry can learn out of COVID? Considering that some organizations now experience growth as we speak, and I speak about remote working tools, which pretty much have seen an explosion in growth, Zoom,
right,
Mura, you name it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the takeaway from all of that?
Again, like some of these are like things that are going to stick, and some of them don't know like what amongst those will stick. But like the remote culture, like remote working, at least for the foreseeable future, is like here to stay, right? Like it's not going away. Travel is not going to bounce back anytime soon. People are going to be a little concerned for the foreseeable future. And so anything that we could be doing in the customer success world, in the product world, to make sure that we're enabling things that work remotely can go a long way. I'll give you a couple of examples. This has nothing to do with Gainsight, the product, but we started doing like virtual happy hours or virtual coffee sessions with all end users. It's open to end users of Gainsight. We didn't discuss the product itself. We spoke about what life looks like, how are people working with their customers, because we sell to CSMs. Well, how are they dealing with working with CSMs when they can't go travel, see them in person, etc. And so just those types of dialogues, and making sure that you're connecting with people, not just about your product, but just about how people are living and behaving and working in these times, goes a long way in these particular times. So remote work is like not going away anytime soon. In fact, it's foreseeable future is just increasing. And so anything that you could be doing to better communicate about your product, but even outside of your product, is highly recommended.
Well, I would say that my opinion is that we will see even bigger growth eventually in the SaaS industry, because I think that people now actually have realized that if you're not online, you don't exist like at all. Your business will suffer the day you will stop being in a physical form. And I think this will eventually lead to the need to have more tools, not only to collaborate, but actually to sell. So perhaps sooner than later, this will actually lead to growth. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. I'll give you an example, sorry, and I'll let you close out. But a business or an industry that's done really well at pivoting from totally in person to like taking things online. Jury's out there whether it's been successful or not, but people have made the decision to move quickly is education technology, right? Like companies that serve software that serves like in-person classrooms, etc., have quickly moved over to doing virtual lessons. Several of our customers in the edtech space have now used in-product messaging, in-product engagement, in-product surveys to then start saying, hey, did you know about this additional course that we offer? Or did you know about this additional thing? To take people from not engaging online at all to completely engaging online. So definitely some industries are reacting much better than others. And there is a lot of learning that we could have even from those.
This is for sure. Thank you so much, Asvin. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. And we will sure keep in touch for next insights soon. Anne, back to you.
Yeah, thank you both very much. That was very insightful, and we learned a ton from you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
All right.
Do you think we can welcome our next guest?
Absolutely. So moving forward, we're going to have our last session. It's going to be with George, who is a PR manager, and Stephanie, who's a communications manager at the Youth Entrepreneurship Club. And they're going to be talking about the true impact a startup organization can have on society in times of a crisis. So I believe they should be joining here soon.
And give us a minute to check.
All right, thank you. Hello, George.
Hello, how are you doing?
How are you?
Fine. You?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And thank you for joining us and talking about the true impact a startup organization can have during times of a crisis.
Nice, thanks for the acceptance. And for the invitation, of course.
Anytime.
Hello.
Hello, Stefiana.
Yes. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for joining. I'm doing well, and yourself?
Thank you. Good. Everything good. Where are you in Greece? Or?
No, I'm located in Florida. So.
Oh, how nice! My I have family there, so.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
We have beautiful weather right now, but I hear so does Greece.
Yes, it's very hot, like very warm. I don't know, like summer waiting here.
Summer's coming.
Yeah, it's here actually.
All right, so thank you guys for joining today. I'd love for you just to tell me a little bit about both of yourselves before we get started.
So I'm a student at the Department of Political Science at the University of Crete at the 4th year. And I am I think 1.5 year now at the organization. I am the manager, the communication and PR manager. I am also part of the Department of Ethno, where I started. And yes, that's all I think.
All right, perfect. Yourself, George.
Nice. Hello, everyone. From me, I'm George Prokopoulos. I'm City and Public Relations Manager of Yata French Club, and also representative and campus coordinator of the Economic Science Department at the UOP and, of course, VNSDSN.
Perfect. And how did you both get involved within entrepreneurship?
Last year, I was a volunteer at the main event of the organization, and I was really inspired and motivated of what the guys were doing, speeches and all the actions there. So I decided to join the organization, and there the journey began. And so also my family has a company, a movie production company in Greece. So I'm interested to learn more things about the business environment and how things work. So to be ready in case I work in my company. So that's why.
That's it. And yourself, George?
As for me, I decided to get engaged in the Yata French Club since I would like to evolve the startup ecosystem of my city, first of all. Since in the non-urban areas, we have some main problems, especially on the innovations, and we don't see startup ideas, startup enterprises, and it's the main problem. Also, volunteering is a unique experience, and I would like to join this. Since I already running out a startup idea, I'm just trying to get a contact with my university and, of course, my business model. So the network of Yata French Club is this that is going to help me and, of course, improve me my soft skill experiences.
Fantastic. That's great. All right. So talking about some global partnerships, how possible could it be? How could it be possible for your organization to see what kind of projects become reality and add value inside the global entrepreneurial frameworks, and of course, on the global and Greek society?
Sure, it's so important. Just making cooperation with methods and, of course, moves in the global framework. Doing this, I think that the Greek startup society only benefits and would have then present its real entrepreneurial phase under this condition of COVID-19. Since we are going to face up with a COVID crisis like this, and we have to be prepared in order to make the right cooperations and be prepared not for the webinars that we are doing now, but for the whole situation, since we are students, we are college students. As I think it's so important for getting global and get the global network, not for your country. So we are going blessed if we have a global partnership, except from the Greek partners.
All right, beautiful. And can you list some of your future priorities that must be adjusted, must be addressed by SDGs?
Sure. I think that from my point of view, and of course, Stefania, there is a huge gap and difference, of course, between the countries that they have multifunctional ecosystem. So the achievement of SDGs of 2030 is necessary to be guided by the principle of the United Nations, and of course through our organization, the Yata French Club. there's a social and positive impact, since our purpose and projects that we are moving on are not only based on SDGs, but they enhance the economic integration and, of course, the innovate integration.
Yes, I totally agree with George. Where actions and events and organizations such as ours can totally help achieving the SDGs goals and have serious social and not only impact. So we can proceed now, I think, with the presentation.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Okay. Sorry, 1 minute.
Just need to upload it.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So to begin with, this initiative started at the last days of 2012 when some students at the Technical University of Crete meet up inside an event at the Technical University talk that's called Technical University Venture, and discuss a subject around innovation and entrepreneurs. Youth Entrepreneurship Club has registered as a legal entry at two entities, in 2015. The founding team were 3 students in Crete, specifically in Hania city, but were being inspired from the academic foundation abroad and believe that Greek universities can change and so the way to create innovation and entrepreneurs. So our vision is to inspire and support young people in order to show them that everyone can gain value and create a positive social or economic impact in Greece. So what we do, George?
It's my role. And the first, we are build our project on the 3 main YEC pillars. That's the communication events, the education programs, and of course, other spin-off support. So the first one, as I said before, we also built the 3 main pillars. And the first one is referred to the communication events, like Startup Greece Week, the biggest startup event in Greece for innovation, and the biggest online, of course, globally, during our days. And of course, the YEC Talks, that are second part of this category, where we diversify them on 2 sections, the academic and the social one. So we don't have impact not only for the college, but for the elder one.
So the second pillar is education programs, where here we have the YEC School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which is local and online. There are education programs. The YEC business trips, which are day visits in local businesses, where people can see how the business works from inside. And last but not least, the YEC internships, where international or local students can have an internship for every month in Greece and improve their skills.
Nice, and we are going through this last one, the last pillar, which is the startup and spin-off support, where via YEC incubation programs, we offer 3 months of mentorship on startups and innovators to see that there's a possibility that the startup idea becomes reality. And this is one of the main purposes.
Okay, so now it's very important for us to mention the being complied with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals is vital for our mission, because as an NGO, we aim at creating strong and diversity inclusive communities by democratizing the source of knowledge and by making all the necessary means available to every social group for the sustainable development of the startup ecosystem. So we adjust all the 17 goals, but now George will tell you more details on those we focus.
So even though we are the priority and the old guys in the organization, we're meet up with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals via United Nations. We are just focusing on the 6th one that you see on one presentation. The significance of the following one of this goals is huge, since each one ensures access to affordable, reliable and sustainable moves of our communities. And as we see, quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, and sustainable city communities are those themes that the Youth Entrepreneurship Club achieve day by day and step by step. So having volunteers and departments at each region of Greece is much more efficient so as to achieve those SDGs integration.
Okay, so based on those goals is also our main event, Startup Greece Week, which this year started with a series of pre-events where Greek startup founders from all over the world participated and shared with us their experience, their stories, and their opinions about this situation and crisis that we are facing. After that, from 4 to 10 of May, the main event, Startup Greece Week, which is the largest conference for startup entrepreneurship in Greece, took place. But this year, unfortunately, due to this pandemic crisis, we decided not to cancel our event, but broadcast it 100% online. And this fact gave us the opportunity to become even bigger and to participate participate more speakers, also to mention and cover even more topics. And we believe that through this we accomplish our goal even more, and that through our session and our discussions we inspire and motivate people, not only young people, but also people that are having their own companies, and they're probably having difficult times at the moment. So good ideas and ways in order to manage the situation were heard. And now George will show us the statistics of our event.
So before we go going, we are going to see the analytic statistics. We're going to present the Startup Greece Week more specifically, since run by the Youth Entrepreneurship Club. And the purpose of the initiative is the promotion of the entrepreneurial spirit in Greek regions. And in these years, Startup Greece Week, every speech and event taking place will be focusing on important issues, and that's what we did. And around concepts of entrepreneurship, developing an idea, startup, and innovation. So particular emphasis placed on the key aspects of the growth of the region of Greece. Except from the online Q&A sessions and panels that they took place during the around 2 months period, we start some industry-specific sessions like CEO session that it was so impressive. The session of there's no much thing as a failure, the investor session, the biohealth session, and of course the logistics on demand session. And as for the statistics, as we mentioned before, Startup Greece Week was and is the largest conference for startups in Greece and like globally. And during this 7-day period, over 60 volunteers and 126 speakers made a successful cooperation in order to attend this impressive event and break the digital limits under the COVID crisis. So furthermore, being for 52 hours, 52 hours, so many hours, live on a framework of 41 countries and 2,000 plus participant attendees, it was so amazing, impressive, as I said before. We're counting this and of course taking a remarkable advantage from the around 80 supporters. We hit the border of 500,000 views and of course 1 million of the general reach.
Okay, so to continue with what we have achieved through these years as an organization. Until 2020, the organization had involved more than 250 volunteers through its action, had direct impact to over 20,000 people, and reached more than 2 million. Also, it's very important to mention that our startup network has gained 8+ million on funding, which we believe gave an impact and value at the Greek startup ecosystem. So, what's next? What are the goals that we have?
So, making investments for our future plans based on our principles and goals. For the next 5 years, so obviously to raise awareness and engage 25,000 individuals by the framework of entrepreneurship and innovation in Greece through projects and actions that include in our agenda, and of course the SDGs Agenda 2030, which at the same time consists by the creation of a network of 100+ mentors and of course startups. And now Stefania is going to present departments and of course the possible create departments during this period.
Okay, so our departments around Greece at the moment is in Crete, where all began, in Chania city, Rethymna city, and Iraklia city, at Tripoli, the department of Tripoli, a department at Thessaloniki, and a department at Rhodes. But we have supporters and partners all over Greece, and this partner gave us the opportunity this year to become even bigger at our main event, Startup Greece Week 2012 and 2020, excuse me, and to have even more city sessions, such as the session of Kalamata, Patera, Ioannina, and Xanthi. But we are willing to transform this cooperation to establish departments in a region all over Greece, and in order to have an even more bigger impact and to achieve even more goals for the Greek and not only ecosystem.
And as we are going to close our presentation, I would like, of course, to thank you for your attention, and I would like to follow and keep contact with us at the egg, so as to feel the magic and the passion of innovation. And of course, feel free ask whatever you want in us via chat or whatever media you want. And I think that the impact on social enterprises and the social entrepreneurship by our organization and of course the other organization of entrepreneurship is so important, not for the next generations and the young generations like us, but for the elder ones mentioned before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I will our presentation and
yeah. Well, thank you guys. I'm sorry I jumped into some of the questions a little bit early, but I think now that we have some more context, I can ask you those questions and our audience will understand what I'm asking a bit more. So, talk about the global partnerships. How is it possible for your organization to see this kind of project become a reality and add value to inside the global entrepreneurial frameworks on both the society and most society as a whole and within Greek society?
Nice. I would like to ask it and say this question from you, Stefania. Like?
Of course. Go ahead, George.
Nice. So, as you mentioned before, and so many opportunities are creating, and so many problems are solving day by day. And what I think as the next generation, we have the mentality as a startup and as a startup organization to solve this and gain value on this. So during the COVID crisis, that will be in the follow-up path of us. We have invested less, and I think we have to invest more at the same time on the digital part. And I think there is so much opportunity. There are so much opportunities for us to attach to investors that they are going to invest less, and the profit going to be higher. And I think that's the most significant opportunity during this period of crisis.
Okay, wonderful. And can you list some of your future priorities that must be addressed by the SDG?
Sure. As I said before, the principles of our organization, of course, is NGO organization, are steady. And since we're all college students, we just want to follow them in our pathway, in the right pathway. So volunteering and of course the theme of intelligent cities are followed by the SDGs of 2030. And I think that these two kind of principles are those ones that we're an organization to achieve day by day, as we said before. Since both female and male guys have the opportunity, and we have to give the opportunity to be not only participants but energetic members in our project.
Awesome. And is it possible to, let me back up, can an organization actually influence people to change their mentality?
Can I answer that one? Yes, I truly support this. I believe that through an experience from an organization, you can totally change your mentality, because you have the chance to cooperate with different people, listen different perspectives, opinions, and experiences, and probably ways to do things. And from taking action, you can see and find ways in order to solve or create things that maybe you didn't know that even existed before. So I think an organization, even more specifically for the young people, is essentially to participate in those actions, not only as a member of an organization, but also as an audience, and listen and hear the experience that other people had, and their opinion, and be open in new ways and, to do things. So, can I hear you? Sorry.
Yeah, hear myself. I'm sorry about that. That's wonderful. Can you give us an example of when an organization, maybe that one that you've worked with, was able to influence people's mentality?
Yeah, specifically now, like we have the pandemic crisis, and I believe that it was very important that we didn't cancel our event, and we managed to do it 100% online, and gave the opportunity to everyone to participate, and in those sessions and discussions that we had, that very important people of the entrepreneurs work, and not only, like we had also academics and people from forums that were saying they were sharing their opinion and their ways to do things. And like, I believe in the crisis not only brings out problems, but opportunities, and it's really important to be ready to understand them and take advantage of them in order to be successful. And also sometimes we maybe we're not able to see the way to manage or to solve our problem, but if we listen to someone else that is in another situation, we can find a way. So I believe that Startup Greece Week was very important, and it's an example that really helped during a difficult period, and I'm very happy that I was part of it.
Yeah, sounds like it was a great event. And is it actually possible to develop the startup ecosystem during this crisis? And if so, how much could this help reduce the consequences that coronavirus is going to have on our economy?
Okay, so as I mentioned, crisis not only create problems, but opportunities to solve those problems. And the whole mentality of the startup ecosystem, I believe, is finding a problem that the entrepreneurs the audience that you're that you want to have is facing, and find a way to solve it. So now we have so many problems, but the thing is, and the opportunity is to find a way to solve them. So you, to create a startup, and I believe this situation maybe create some opportunities, as I said, in the ecosystem. Of course, we have to be careful because some investors are in a limited situation, and probably as everyone facing their own problems. But I believe that there are problems that will remain in our society from this crisis. And it's important to find a way to solve them, and maybe a startup is a solution to this.
Fantastic. All right. And to what extent do you believe that the UN's goals set for 2030 are going to actually be achieved?
Which one, George, you would like to answer this one, or should I?
Of course. As we said before during the presentation, we're talking about the SDGs of the agenda of 2030. We said that there is a gap. So there are over 200 countries globally that they're trying day by day to achieve these goals. It's so difficult to do this, since there's the difference level between the education, the innovation, and of course the main health system, since we are talking about the COVID crisis, and of course the biohealth system. I think that from my perspective, as we're talking about Greece, is something limited level. So if we're talking about Sweden, we are ranked on the first high level of the scale. Since there is this gap in the multifunctional ecosystem, as I said before, the environment of SDGs could be guided by the principles I said of the United Nations. I think that if the teamwork and the cooperation between the countries, and not only between the region of the countries, are more generally integrated. So if there's an integration in the three main pillars, which is the education, health system, and of course the innovation, we will have the best result that we could imagine. So I think it's too early to predict the future, and if the SDGs 2030 will achieve now.
Okay, fantastic. And I believe my final question, which you definitely touched on, but I'd love to ask it very directly, is can an organization like yours really speed up the implementation of those plans?
Of course, sure. Through organization have a positive and social impact, not only our society, but globally, like this week, with our actions. And our purposes and projects that we're running out are not only based on the SDGs. And of course, we want to enhance the startup and economic integration. And we're trying to achieve the economic integration and, of course, the health system integration via our health panels that we made reality during our sessions, and, of course, our online panels and the pre-event during Startup this week. So it's a chance to enhance it. And I think that we're going to step by step to achieve during the new year via the cities and of course the academic sector, where each guy has to get this impact and of course feel what was COVID-19 that we are passed out.
Awesome. Okay, sounds good and sounds very promising too. So those are all of my questions. If we have any questions from the audience, that would be wonderful. Or if you guys know of any questions that you get, it's pretty typical, I'm sure that we would love to hear those answers.
I only would like to add that through the participation in an organization, you can get a huge experience. You learn how to work inside a team, to cooperate well in order to achieve a goal, to be more organized, to multitask sometimes, and to be able to solve the last minute's problem, like they're in an event. Problems are always coming up, and the adaptability and it's necessary in order to solve them. So and to be alert in any time. So I believe like organizations are really helpful for young people in order to be ready for the future job or whatever they are willing to do. I don't know if George would like to add something, but this is...
I'm fully completely by the sakes of Stefania. I'd like to say the same.
Okay, fantastic. I couldn't agree more. I believe that for the startup systems to continue, we have to get the young people involved. So it's really great.
Nice.
Okay, so thank you guys so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day. And
it was an honor to have a discussion with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And
thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for the acceptance, and of course, we wish the best for all. Best wishes of all from the Entrepreneurship Club.
Wish you all the best. And also, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. All right. So thank you guys for attending the first Product-Led Hub boot camps, the first day. We still have 3 more days left for you until Friday, so 4 more days actually, with some of the world's top SaaS leaders. So be sure to register in the link below, and we hope to see you all tomorrow. So thank you and have a good one.